Okay, thank you. Good evening. I'd like to call to order the Planning Board meeting for September 17th, 2019. First on our agenda tonight, we welcome Trish Settles from the Central Massachusetts Regional Planning Commission, CMRPC, for a discussion regarding zoning bylaws for solar energy systems and hazardous waste facilities. So welcome, Trish. Thanks for coming tonight. We're excited to hear what you have to say. And
well, I'm hoping to hear more what you guys have to say and hear your concerns, and then we can figure out how we might be able to help you guys going forward. I talked a little bit with Kathy and yourself, Carrie, a little bit, at the meeting the other night. And I have to apologize. So I was going to bring with me Ron Barron, who has been kind of really studying the solar stuff. Only to find out that he was on vacation. And then Eli Goldman, who's also been studying this for us, and he's just resigned. So you're with me. You get stuck with me tonight. But we've just hired and brought on a new land use planner. We're very excited about whose specialty is solar permitting. So we feel like we'll be really be able to help you guys. We've done a little background research. They've tried to brief me on some of this stuff since I don't need to delve into it quite as much. But have a few resources that we want to make you guys aware of. One, there's a workshop coming up on Monday down in Oxford that is focused on solar permitting of large scale facilities. We have our quarterly meeting. We just had one last Thursday. Time flies. It was our next one in November will be also on solar permitting, because you guys are facing this stuff. This is a big issue in our region. And it differs from town to town, and so we're one of our roles, in addition to being able to provide technical assistance to you guys, is just to be able to convene the dialogues between folks like Kathy and yourselves, Paul Delaquila and Spencer, who's been digging into this as well, trying to really kind of figure out what the best practice on this stuff is. And so we have, obviously you have local planning assistance you can tap into to us for. You guys are, for those of you who are unfamiliar with CMRPC, each town pays an assessment to the Regional Planning Agency, and as part of that assessment, you are eligible for professional planning assistance and what we call hours. It's kind of the currency, if you will. And so every town in our region, which is City of Worcester and 39 surrounding communities, gets 12 hours to start with. And for every event that Kathy or Carrie or Juliana come to, you get another hour. And so our staff are able to work with you on a variety of projects. And this is a perfect example of the use of that kind of local planning assistance, where we can help you kind of navigate what are best practices with regard to developing a bylaw related to solar, large-scale use. And I think the other one you're interested in is a hazardous waste site bylaw. We've done a little bit of research on this. We feel like that there is some value we can bring to you guys. I'm not sure we can do all of that in 12 hours, so it might be something you guys want to decide which is, the best, an avenue you want to pursue first and prioritize some stuff. There may be some resources. It might be that solar is something you can figure out on your own, and you really want us to dig into the hazardous waste site stuff, or vice versa. There's a lot of happening around the solar right now. There's a lot of models out there that you might be able to tweak or kind of cater to, kind of modify to customize it for the town of Northborough. Less so around the hazardous waste site stuff. You guys are pretty rare if you're going to go down that path. There's not a whole lot of bylaws that we've been able to find in that venue. So we're happy to kind of work with. We've got a number of people who are very comfortable working with the folks at DEP to figure that out. So I think it's really a matter of what your sensibilities are in terms of where do you want to put our energies. We're also able to, we can write it, we can bring it to you, let you then cater it, kind of workshop it in public hearings and so forth. And then the other option is, and we've got, we set aside some dollars with regard to because solar is a big issue. It's kind of started for us anyway, with a lot of the community in our western part of our region who are really kind of grappling with this. Solar companies were coming at Braintrees and Oakhams and Berries and Hardwick rapid fire because of the large amounts of land that they have out there. And so they're taking a different, and they're taking a little bit different kind of priorities and perspective on this. They're really worried about zone, so it's not as complicated as your zoning, is, so everybody's a little bit different. You know, we went through much like this with kind of these emerging zoning issues when we went through the permitting for medical and then recreational marijuana. We did kind of the same as, you know, that the Commonwealth grapples with and kind of helps every town kind of come up with what's best fit for them, whether it's medical marijuana or adult entertainment or solar facilities. And so we as your regional planning agency are really kind of happy to help you guys in the best way that we can.
So would it be helpful for you if we asked the question so you can see our line of thinking?
Absolutely,
Or
that's
just
kind of what I was hoping to hear
Okay.
today, is kind of what are your particular, concerns? We can start to kind of look for that, as we're talking to, and again, we're talking not only with the folks in our region, the Oxfords and the Spencers and the Westboroughs and so forth, Princetons, but we're also talking to folks around the Commonwealth. We'll be out in Springfield on the days. So we also set aside district local technical assistance, which is a pot of money that the legislature makes available to regional planning agencies each year for us to kind of, and it's really awesome money because it allows us to kind of develop projects that our communities are looking for. And so last year we did set aside a chunk of that, and $200,000 that people develop projects, they come to us and ask for assistance. Sometimes we pull those together, a number of towns are looking for a similar thing, and we make it one big project. And so we did that for medical marijuana. We also did that for solar this year, and so it's running out. It's a calendar year, so odds are we're gonna roll that back around. We've got a little bit more in the legislature this year, so we're very excited about that. Odds are in January we'll continue this solar and might be able to add some funding to that. So, if there's dollars that we can pull out of a pot of money for solar bylaws and help a number of communities, we'll do that. My guess is that there's not gonna be a specific project around hazardous waste siting stuff, but, I don't know that for sure.
I think with Trish and I talking about this, I think that there's probably, depending on your discussion tonight, but I think that there's probably, between dusting off our bylaw that the planning board presented a few years ago, which there was nothing wrong with that bylaw. There wasn't even any discussion at town meeting of things that people had, heartburn about in that particular bylaw. But as we've talked about before, that particular town meeting, anything that had to do with regulations was denied. That town meeting was very unique. So between that and I think what the state has for examples, some of the experts that Central Mass is going to pull together, the Audubon Society or just Mass Audubon, yeah. They have some.
They have some stuff. East
yeah.
Club and Land Trust is amazing. The number of folks who, and with their own kind of special bent, everybody's coming in at this with a different perspective.
Mm-hmm.
If you're coming at this from some of the green energy folks, you've got one bent. If you're coming at it from a preservation bent, you have a different kind of slant on the issue.
So I think we meaning me, would be able to put together a draft bylaw that Central Mass would, review, for us, and so I think that the brunt of the local planning hours are going to have to go to hazardous waste because there just is so little out there, and not any communities that we can really pull from to use their bylaws. And so I think that's where the research is going to have to go.
I don't know if you had a chance to look at Shrewsbury, and I'm not, well versed in it for the hazardous waste, but I thought theirs looked pretty good. Shrewsbury, Mass had one.
Well, Shrewsbury's was very specific for a very specific parcel.
Yeah.
And it was to prevent a company, a soil reclamation company, from locating there. So.
Right. We wouldn't want that here.
So whether or not that, I can't tell just from reading it. It's just
Right.
not my area. And like Trish said, this is DEP's area. I mean, there's a whole level of expertise that that nobody in this town hall has about
Well,
hazardous
we
waste
would probably come in
facilities.
and, you know, come in with several sets of questions, you know, having done some research and looked at, you know, the Shrewsburys, I think there's also some down on the South Shore that have been developed. And find out, you know, what are your concerns? Is it just about, you know, what are you know, it's hazardous waste sites, you know, you're probably trying to keep them in areas that are protective of public health and your natural resources and so forth. And so we'll take a look at the map, probably develop a draft of something that we think might be a good starting place, and then run that by you to give you something to react to. You know, we'll probably develop a map that says, you know, this is where we think, you know, given kind of your biohabitat, your commercial sites, your sensitive receptors, your brownfield sites, your industrial zones, this might be, you know, possible locations that you want to consider. And at least it'll get you guys started down that path. I mean, nothing is done until it gets to town meeting, and so at least give you something that you can then take to a public hearing, get the stakeholders to really kind of review and kind of provide some input and comment on, and then you've got something to move forward with. But 12 hours, you know, with the research, and especially something like this that's fairly new to us. I mean, we don't have a whole lot of this happening in the region. We're spending a lot more time on, like I said, solar and lake house zoning right now, and senior zoning and a variety of other things. But so that would be my strategy. I think that I would suggest is to kind of go down that path. Let us do a little bit of, you know, authorize us to use your LPA, and I think that comes from Carrie. We start down the path and do a little bit of digging, come back to you guys with, you know, some of the questions that we've developed just based on our initial research. You know, what is it you're trying to protect? Who is it, you know, what are you trying to cite? What do you think are the likely kind of, you may never get a site coming, but my sense is that, you know, the bylaw will be there, and you've got, you know, kind of protections, if you will, for that.
Okay.
Does anyone, oh, go ahead. Yeah, I was
Sorry.
gonna say, does anyone on the board have any comments or questions?
That was my main concern, is we do have some industrial areas near residential. I just really wanted to protect the industrial areas that are near residential, and we have some groundwater areas. And
And
right now, I
typically-
think it can come, if a facility comes in, it can go anywhere in industrial. I think it would be, you know, it'd be good to write something that has a little bit of a buffer, or just something to have a little bit of protection.
Well, and I think you probably have a number of bylaws. I mean, if the groundwater zones are all protected by wellhead protection areas, I mean, you've got a lot of protections in place, and we can kind of summarize those for you. You may not even, I mean, obviously getting a bylaw passed takes a lot of energy and a lot of, you know, so maybe you decide that, you know, we're protected enough, that, you know, you're not getting the onslaught of hazardous waste sites coming, you know, you've got this in your pocket, you just may decide you don't wanna pursue it, but we'll help you find some of those answers and make those decisions, so.
Right, I guess we have one now, and it got cited right near, and it was cited back in the 90s, but it was cited right near a neighborhood, it's cited on groundwater, it's in commercial. I just want to make sure something like that doesn't happen again,
Okay.
because there were ways to stop it then, but it still went through, so.
Yeah.
And I know the rules have changed since then,
Yeah,
but I thought with a little regulation, if somebody came to our town and saw, well, Northborough, you know, you can't do this, this, and this, they might say, well, maybe I'll try over in Grafton, you know? I mean, it's a little bit of protection, they want to go where it's easier. That's what I'm thinking.
Michelle, did you have some comments?
Did you want to talk a little bit about our solar bylaw that we currently had that didn't pass at town meeting, and thoughts about?
I haven't had a chance to look
Okay.
at your specific bylaw.
So I could just reiterate what Kathy said, which was, we had worked quite some time on the bylaw. I thought it was a good bylaw, it was a solid
That was
one.
my understanding.
I think it was just a group of residents who were concerned about in an area where they have larger parcels of land. And so what might be accommodating to that is if you were to have someone who might own 20 acres of land, you would say, we'll allow solar on maybe 5 of the acres or 10, so that there's a significant buffer between the residents and the solar farm. Or it could be something that would need a majority vote if you have so many acres at town meeting. I just think it's unfortunate that town doesn't have the capability of using the town-owned land to do solar. And I think that would, because I see it in neighboring communities, in Westboro and other communities, using town-owned land for resources, for financial resources for solar.
Absolutely.
And I think it's unfortunate that we don't have that in our community. But I do understand the concerns of the neighbors with the, you know, who are in the areas that have the larger parcels. So I think that, you know, allowing the town to, you know, build solar on the town-owned land is one option that I think is positive for the community.
Yeah.
On the other hand, trying to figure out some sort of protection for the abutters who just may abut something that has 20 acres and,
Right, right, right.
you know, they've decided not to develop it or give it to Mount Pisgah or something.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, just to preserve that for the neighborhoods around there. So I think there, you know, I think this is now the time,
Mhm.
that we could probably do that.
Yeah, no, I agree. No, there's several of the bylaws that we have reviewed, you know, have all kinds of provisions for kind of, you know, buffer zones around the facilities, or almost like an open space residential design where you kind of have to still set off some upland, for some of this stuff. Considering permeability, you know, and all that.
There's not too many lots that you could actually do it, so we could, almost like we've done in some other exercises with other bylaws, which is look at the lots that this possibly could happen. But, you know, the reason why I pushed for this was really for the town's capabilities to use, their town-owned land for solar.
One of the things we've done in a number of communities that kind of plays into this, it's not specifically related, but is we've done, build-out analysis. It's been a while since we've done the, probably 2003, 2004 was the last time we did a build-out.
Well, we have one as part of the master
I'm
plan,
wondering if that
it's
was
sort of a
raised.
mini build-out,
That
but,
would be actually
yeah,
really helpful. I think,
yep,
for
I'll get you that
this,
information.
where you've been able to look at your current zoning, the slopes and other kind of, land use restrictions, and figure out kind of what is developable in some of the lots. You definitely use, that's an incredible tool, and we're getting really savvy at kind of looking at that. The other thing, we've got some really cool tools in terms of kind of market, you know, being able to look at like market data, what would be an attractive lot for solar or hazardous waste stuff. You know, in terms of just the market where, you know, there's some parcels that are just too expensive, they're not coming, and pull that into the analysis as well.
Anything else?
No, that's it, thanks.
Lily, do you have any comments or questions? You have any?
First question I have is for Michelle. You say town-owned land, what are you referring to?
So, let's say they wanted some solar up on the high school,
Okay,
you know, let's say, out near, what's the big parcel of land that's out near Marlboro's,
On
Boundary
Boundary
Street.
Street.
you know, something like that,
yeah,
you know.
okay. I'm kind of curious, like, are we encroaching on open space, or what your thought was there? That's the only reason I asked.
Yeah, you know, I think it would probably, I mean, when you look at the town-owned land, you'd have to go through the open space, you
Right.
know, and to see if there's a concern about that. But you can see it in, for example, along the major highways, you see it coming down Mass Pike as you're going
Sure,
495 in Westboro, Southboro. You just see these small pockets of, I don't know if it's town-owned or private, but they use it for solar, which I think, you know, might be useful for the community to raise some revenue.
sure, sure.
So that's what I would think about. I mean, I don't think you'd probably want to keep it in areas that you're using for trails or Mount Pisgah or, you know, any of that area that's preserved. And then I think you'd probably want to go through the same exercise of, even if you wanted to put some in the high school, you'd probably want the same thing about how is it going to affect the surrounding community or whatever, you know, the neighborhood or stuff like
Sure.
that. So, you know, but I still don't, I think this sort of died too quickly because of some current concerns from residents that just came to the meeting and just,
Sure.
you know, we couldn't get the 2/3 majority vote. This time, I think if we hear their concerns and embed their concerns into the zoning, then we could probably get it to pass.
Yep.
Hopefully.
Okay, so in terms of solar, I think where we are as a town, I think available land for the most part, I'm sure there's some unique parcels. People would want to develop it for residential or commercial uses before doing solar, but I think we do have to have protections, and not so much just even with where and how big, but decommissioning in 30 years from now and cleaning up the land later on, I think is which is really kind of the scary part of that. In terms of hazardous waste, I would think that's a really worthwhile exercise for us to dig in to see what other towns have done. Just make sure that we've got all the protections in place So if something does come to town, we have the tools already there to at least make sure they're going in the right places and, you know, they're away from residential areas, away from groundwater and those type of things.
Anything else?
No.
So, a couple things that I was thinking about was, as in terms of the hazardous bylaw, the one thing, not one thing, but, not the one thing, but one thing that does concern me is the proximity of our industrial zone to the high school. So I think a long time ago, Amy, you mentioned some places have, it needs to be like miles away from a place like a school or where a community congregates. So just thinking about how we incorporate something like that to make sure there's like there's a lot of development over by the high school now, so I don't know, you know, so far, like warehouses and trucking for the most part. Well, not even trucking anymore, mostly warehouses.
Well, yeah, I
Or
mean,
shipping,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Shipping, yeah. So I would just want to be mindful of the high school, especially over that side of town. And then one thing that I was confused about is when I was looking at the Mass General Law for special permits, it seemed as if hazardous waste facilities were allowed by right in industrial. Is that, or is that not the case? I don't know, I don't know enough about it.
I-
Or,
nor do I.
okay. So you can only condition it, but you can't.
I think that's correct. I think
Yep,
that's
they
correct.
are.
Right, I
There
don't-
There are a lot of limits to what you can, I mean, because, and a lot of it is about the, kind of the timing of how this came through the, you know, DEP as they were grappling with, you know, the siting of hazardous waste facilities across the Commonwealth. So, as we, you know, we talked about earlier, a lot of those protections are now written into other types of bylaws, you know, the wellhead protection zones and other, you know, there are now activity and use limitations, you know, if it's a brownfield site, there, you know, the plumes, though, you know, and I was a hazardous waste environmental engineer for a number of years, but a lot of it's changed since I was doing it, where, you know, you think the plumes are gonna actually extend miles, but they're really, because of the type of waste that they're dealing with, it's really fairly contained. I mean, it's not like, it hits the soil and immediately it's in, you know, Lake Chauncey or something like that. I mean, most of these things are pretty well minimized into like a, you know, very small plume, if you will, if it hits the soil or the groundwater. Not that they can't extend, you know, there are often, obviously, there's things that migrate much faster depending on where they hit the subsurface. But
Okay.
I think we can bring some, you know, we can have some conversations with the folks at the DEP and figure out the best strategy for you guys on that. And that may be I guess from my perspective, there's a lot of stuff moving. We can obviously be a resource with regard to the solar, but I think the hazardous waste thing, we can kind of, with the resource, you know, since there's not a solar kind of movement around, you know, there's not a movement around that. You guys are the only ones right now that are working on that. And you kind of be the trendsetter.
Well, and then, so then for going to the solar side of it, just some questions there. So, for example, if we are on the forefront of it, are there other communities, is there an opportunity to do any joint work that would
Yeah,
save us some
absolutely.
trouble, or, I don't know how that works.
Like I'm saying, there are a lot of resources, there are a lot of workshops happening, there are a lot of bylaws and kind of pieces of bylaws, you know, that we can, and if, my sense is that there might be some resources out of this pot of money that we've set aside for solar, if not this calendar year, which is kind of this grant cycle, then in the next year, that we might be able to help, you guys, more specifically around the solar stuff. I just don't know that it will get you to town meeting that fast, is the only challenge around that.
Okay. And then in just thinking about, so Kathy, you sent out an article that was really helpful. And I think, Trish, you received it
Yeah, I
as well. I
did,
don't know
yeah.
if you got to look at it or not, or if any board members got to read it. But I thought some interesting points were brought up in there that I just wanted to mention now. One was just specifically about mitigation. What's the proper, if you have an applicant present something like that kind of solar use, what kind of mitigation is available? Any sort of review by a licensed third party, if we don't have the in-house expertise, should we, you know, what does the process look like for this type of application? Is it different than our current process, or do we need other little pieces added to it along the way? One thing I thought was really interesting, which I don't want to get too far down the weeds, but just providing for things like wildlife corridors to make sure that if we are to put it in certain places, first of all, we're not clear cutting all of our forests and then not providing ability for wildlife to cut through. hopefully not cutting our forests down in the first place. But if we were to use any of the brownfields or previously disturbed land for this, what does that look like in terms of incentive? So so Anthony, you mentioned other people who may want to develop it for residential or commercial. So is our goal to be, provide energy back to the grid, or is our goal to increase revenue to the town? I guess we'd have to think about it, because what does the revenue, what do the incentives look like for solar versus if you were to build commercial or residential? Or I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah,
So
I
those are
think the
just,
cost benefit analysis is pretty fascinating right now, given, kind of a lot of it will depend on the price of the SRECs, and it's a whole different, right, how that's getting priced, the value of the land, the housing markets or the other markets that are out there. It's kind of a pretty, and you guys are in an area where the value of the land and, all this is, you really have to do a pretty thorough analysis to make sure you weren't missing any kind of, of the value that might be assumed because of the use of the land or the value of the land, and the variety of kind of options that anybody would have. Even just, leaving it, undeveloped, is huge. And, the town has the CPA, it could decide to, as you were pointing out, Michelle, it could buy the land and do its own, produce its own energy. So there's a lot to think about when you're doing a lot of this stuff. A lot of kind of variables that you would want to consider as you're crafting a bylaw.
okay. So those were just a couple of the things. The only other thing I think was just really understanding any sort of impact that may be negative impact. So if we were to grant some sort of application, it would be an up to 40-year endeavor. You can't all of a sudden take it down tomorrow. So what does that look like? If for some reason we did clear cut, how easy is it to put it back the way it was? Can you ever put it back? Or is that the road you take and that's it? So just understanding that a little bit. And maybe that's just via research, looking if there are helpful documents. That's not something you have to.
They're kind of at least with the solar that I've had some people who have talked about, they're kind of, you can do dual uses. So you've got solar, but you also have some grazing underneath the soil, where you have some pasture land underneath it. There are a variety of different things. You've obviously seen the areas where they do have the solar panels, and you have carports, over the high schools and there are a variety of kind of dual use kind of.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And I think the focus, at least for suburban communities, has been, in some of the bylaws that I've recently seen, has been away from clear cutting.
Okay.
Just because you had a piece that necessarily couldn't be developed residentially or commercially, like, oh, well, let's throw some solar there. But what you end up is, taking down 10 acres of trees or something. So, you can have bylaws that would dissuade that, and instead, what you want to see is the carports, or, like what's up at National Grid, that was put in their parking lot, or, on a vacant, non-forested, I guess, because pretty much everything is vegetated, but, non-forested piece. So I think there's ways to write that into the bylaw.
Yeah, you can be protective of biohabitat and vernal
Right.
pools and sensitive areas. There's also kind of, as you probably know, when you deforest something, you create higher rates of erosion because you don't have the vegetation holding the soil down. It lends itself to other kind of natural challenges, natural resource challenges within that.
Okay. Any other comments from anyone on the board?
No, I thought those are great comments. Now, well, I guess I can ask later, because I hate to take up Trish's time, because it's a question for Kathy. It's just where we stand today, because we don't have one, is it?
Well, I was gonna say, the other with solar is, so the companies that are out there looking to, buy land to do the solar developments, they're also looking kind of very strategically about the proximity of that land to the grid, right? I mean, the distribution isn't just like find the land and then we'll just plumb it over to the power lines. There is a proximity issue, and so some of that is also driving it. I mean, there's so many variables in some of this stuff. There are also folks out there that are just buying land so that they might have the option, to do this. And trying to permit stuff, even with the thought that they may never do it.
We, in the, say like the last 15 years or so, nobody's beating down our door in North Grove for solar. The only company that we have dealt with is the company that worked with National Grid, that wanted to do it in their parking lot, which to me was is a perfect use for, a space that's already completely, impervious. And but just because nobody's, knocking on our door and, asking to meet, with staff to talk about this, doesn't mean that we should, especially as a green community, doesn't mean that we should at least attempt to, get another bylaw approved at town meeting.
Okay. Anything else on this end?
No.
No. Kathy, do you have anything you want to add, or?
Just wanted to say time-wise, and Trish and I didn't talk about this, but knowing what you have for your next two meetings, your October meetings, what I would suggest is that we put this on, and I don't know what the date, in October, in November, your first meeting in November, is put this back on and maybe have Trish or Ron or whoever it is
Yeah.
coming back.
And we'll do, Ron gets back from Barcelona tomorrow, so I'm sure he'll be excited. He's actually been going back and forth with me on WhatsApp or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But he's got this on his to-do list. He's really to research, both, obviously, they're working on the solar stuff. You guys have the workshops, like I said, there are a number of them coming up.
So we'd be looking at November 5th, and which Apple is telling me is an election day, but I do not think that there's a local election, because there's a very particular state statute that if there's a local election, the planning board, the only board, the planning board can't meet.
Really?
Yep, any other board could meet. Nobody does, but the planning board specifically is prohibited. So November 5th would be your first meeting in November, and if that works.
Okay. If we wanted to commit hours to it, though, do you need to know sooner than November? I think with their calendar years, so.
Yeah, so the sooner that we can kind of plan it helps us plan going forward. And your 12 hours, and actually you're probably higher than that because you're on the executive committee and Kathy was, you both, so you're probably looking at your available hours are probably more like 15, 16. Over the course of the year, you can max that out at 24 hours or something like that. So yeah, it would help us to know whether you want us to kind of delve into the hazardous waste or into the solar, or what percentages you want us to kind of move forward on that.
So do you foresee if we decided, since we have, I think we have a fairly decent solar bylaw and just needs to be tweaked, do you foresee if we were to start in November on the hazardous waste one, that we could be ready to submit something for town meeting in February 1st?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think that's very doable.
Because I think, like, what we're gonna find out, like Trish said, there's landscape buffers, there's huge landscape buffers in our zoning. Of course, there's parking standards and so forth, but there's landscape buffers, there's performance standards, so those exist in our bylaw, which would be applicable to anyone coming in. So it's not going to be just a matter of where you want to cite it, but, I think, there's existing bylaws that are going to pertain to this. So like not everything is going to have to be written from scratch.
And we've come into communities thinking that we were gonna write a specific low-impact development bylaw, and what's actually happened is we've worked through the existing bylaws and added components that made kind of your goal, accomplished, but by putting it into different components of the bylaw. So if it's a low-impact bylaw that's really trying to manage the stormwater, that it's not an individual bylaw that says all this, but it's kind of incorporated into your open space residential design bylaw, into your all those other bylaws, so that it's more integrated as opposed, and with a thought that it's accomplishing the same
Okay, so should we make that decision, would the board be prepared to allocate whatever time we need, maybe 12, that if we have 12, we at least
Let's
have
start
12.
there.
Yeah.
You can always come back. And what we'll do is, come up with, I'll just draft up, kind of where I think we're gonna go. That way you guys have a sense, we'll research from the existing bylaws, talk to the DEP, get their perspective on it. We'll ask you guys to put together maybe a little kind of synopsis of what your goals are with regard to the hazards, just so we have it in writing, and then we'll get Ron and Brooke to really start delving into drafting something specific for you guys.
Okay, so why don't, just to make it official, we'll do a motion then, if you don't mind. If anyone would like to make a motion to allocate 12 LGA, you call them LGA?
Local planning assistance.
LPA, okay.
LPA.
LPA hours for assistance with hazardous and possibly solar bylaws.
So,
I said so moved, right?
Second?
second.
Okay, discussion? Oh, did you have a question?
Nope.
Oh,
I'm good.
okay, sorry. All in favor? Okay, great, thank you.
I will draft up just a short kind of work plan for Ron, and we'll send it to you guys for
Yep.
your next meeting.
Yep. Yeah.
Cool.
Thank you so much, this was great.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. Next, we have, consideration of minutes.
you.
Thank you, Trish. Next on our agenda, we have the consideration of minutes. I believe we have only August 6th, correct?
Yes.
Okay,
You have August 6th, and Amy had provided a couple of edits. Carrie, you were okay with the minutes? So Amy, Amy, you want to go over yours, or?
I didn't even.
Or I
bring
can-
a piece of
okay.
paper.
So there was a couple typos that obviously we'll take care of. And then, actually, they were kind of all edits like that, Amy, right? I mean, there was no changing of the context or anything. There was an edit on page 5, again, a spelling, same thing on page 6, and then on page 7, Amy just kind of expanded on what the sentence was about, the development of businesses at the baseball training facility. If it was possible to, put a hotel or Friendlies, and then just expanded on that in a sentence.
okay.
And then I didn't have any changes from anybody else.
Any additional edits to the minutes?
Wasn't here.
Millie? Oh, that's right. Millie?
No,
Okay.
Good, okay. Is there a motion to accept the minutes as amended?
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes as amended.
Second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor? And one abstention?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, next we have our last piece of the master plan update, and I apologize, I didn't ask you in advance if you'd cover it, but you do such a great job. What was it? You will. Land use. The last component.
Oh, here we go. Okay. I don't know, I think I'll let Amy start on this. She did a good job. Look at all of her notes here.
No, you do something with that. I go too long, but,
Yeah, why don't you start? You can start on this, 'cause you- and I'll add to it as we go along.
Okay, well, we don't have to go into super detail. Really, the
Right.
point is just to look through the land use section and determine if there are any comments or questions, or if there are any specific debate during master plan steering committee that would be helpful if we understood, or any feedback from the public forums that would be helpful to know, anything like that.
Yeah, so I think on this one, I mean, probably this one had, I wouldn't say it had as much discussion as the housing did, would you say, Kathy? I think the main part of this one, and everything seemed to do in master plan, went back to our downtown area, where they're conducting a study on the downtown area to figure out how to have a vision for the downtown and how to, make it more pedestrian and business friendly. So that was clearly a discussion, and that is LU2, where we talk a lot about enhancing the downtown and promoting a pleasing and welcoming appearance. Some of the other stuff is more the big picture stuff, where you're looking at from chapter 61, which is affordable housing, and then there's some guidelines with commercial and industrial development. That is probably it. Then we talked a little bit about working with the Regional Transportation Authority, primarily also looking at the Southwest Corridor, which is Route 20 that goes down to the mall down there, and then updating the maps and looking at any overlays that we can consider down there. We also talked about, and I know this isn't prioritized, but when you get down to that area, talking about increasing the water and sewer capacity for Route 20 and Route 9 to enhance development. So when you're looking to build out for 20 or 30 years, you wanna look at your water and sewer capacity. That was pretty much it. Like I said, when we talked about land use, a lot of the focus had to be on downtown. And then we did do we spent quite a bit of time talking about Route 9 and 20 and how to develop that as well.
Any comments or questions from the board? Really?
The only thing that I have a couple questions on is when it says to you review the studies and.
Did you want to play my phone over?
Oh, sorry. I didn't see my pieces of paper though. Just a couple of times, like on page, land use, 3-3, it says perform periodic review, but it doesn't really qualify any time elements to that, so I just think that's kind of a vague, goal.
So I think how this completes the whole project that we're working on is there's an implementation plan that we'll be working on this Thursday night. And throughout the implementation plan, it's either, the leadership is either the Board of Selectmen or the Planning Board,
Okay.
And through that, it would be a directive, most likely, because it has to do with zoning, which would be the Planning Board, where you would
Yeah.
look at your zoning for industrial and commercial, And then, so that's your leadership, and then without the leadership, then you have your stakeholders, like who's that involved? Well, you have your ZBA, and then, either what other committees that would be involved in, that would have some effect in it. So, this implementation plan that Amy has, it's several pages long, and it goes by each category, and then they list it on its feasibility of cost, and then also who are the stakeholders and who's the person or the group or the department chairing it
Okay.
or leading it.
And then whether it's like short-term,
Short-term.
Long-term.
mid-term, long-term.
Yeah.
And I forgot there's a definition for each one of those, Millie. I just forgot how many years. Short-term is, I think, like within 1 to 2 years, and then it's maybe like a 3 to 5 years, and then I forgot what long-term was. So that's all in the implementation plan, like Michelle said, that's what the committee has, and then it'll be discussed on Thursday.
On what that definition of those, like, periodic reviews?
Yeah, and that's
Okay.
gonna be included as and there's money symbols, and then, like I said, short-term, mid-term, long-term, what those definitions are.
And maybe a good idea would be at our next planning board meeting if we discuss with you guys the implementation plan, because everyone was supposed to get feedback for this meeting, and then the consultants will tweak it, and there'll be just some discussion on it, and then I'm sure it'll be a draft where we'll be going over and doing stuff and making changes to it. So,
Did you have other questions or comments?
That's it for now.
Anthony, do you have anything?
Yeah, the only thing that kind of stuck out in land use for me was the LU1-2, where it says build off the 495 Metro West Development Compact Plan. And I honestly just looked that up for the first time today, and I think I'd like to review that. I think we should, unless Amy priority has, but to see how that plays into the master plan, if we're gonna use that as a basis for planning. But I just think that's something we should review in a little bit closer in detail, if we haven't.
I can just give you it's something that's been around for years.
Right.
So it's something that I've been involved with. and along with the assistant town administrator as our economic development coordinator. So the compact plan is something that the 495 Metro West, the partnership initiated, and it's with all of the communities in our region. There's probably about 22 communities, so it's not just, our surrounding communities. It's all the communities up and down Route interchange 495. And so it talks about the very basic description of it is it's all information related to the 128 drive or development push along 128 has moved to 495, and it talks about the capacity and the number of employers out here, and then the number of employers that could still come to this area, and then all of the needs of the area. And of course, transportation is transportation infrastructure, water, sewer. That's those are the two of the main topics. So the and then part of the compact plan is what every community did was put together what's called a PDA, a priority development area. And that was all, each town went through a series of what they considered to be their primary or priority development areas. And, Bartlett Street, the 495 area, was our number one, because at the time it was pretty vacant. We didn't have, I think maybe A. Dewey Pile was the only one that was out there. And obviously that's since been developed. And then we only have 3 industrial areas in this town, but the primary focus was on advertising that our area closest to 495 is our priority area. So it's really just it's building on top of that.
Thank you. That's all I
Anything
had.
else?
No.
Okay. The one thing that I actually really liked, because it's the conduct a visual preference survey with the community to determine what kind of development it prefers in downtown. Because I feel like with some of the surveys, when people answer a question, like they may have in their head a picture, when you say high density or open space, what does that mean to people? And some of the terms that were used in the master plan, I still think we struggle with defining. Like we talked about missing middle last time, or different terms like that I don't think people can visualize, and including myself. And I think it's helpful if you could show me something and say, this is what that looks like. And then I can say, oh yes, I do like that, or I don't like that. Because otherwise we're trying to quantify what people's perceptions are, which I think is really difficult. And so then when we look at something like investigate density bonuses for promoting higher densities in downtown, in my mind, that concerns me, but if you showed me what that looked like, maybe it wouldn't. Maybe it's not a scary thing. Maybe it's a good thing. I don't know. So I think that's helpful to have that, and I think I was there at that meeting that someone suggested it, and I thought it was a really great idea to put that in there. I think that was my...
We said a picture's worth 1,000 words.
They are, though. I think it
Yeah.
helps people. If in the surveys, we
They're
felt
fun
like...
to do too. It's
Yeah,
it's not dry. I mean,
right.
it's, I've been involved with them before. And
Oh,
it's very interactive. I mean, obviously it can be whatever you want it to be, but literally you are putting, do you prefer this or this? And then you, okay, so you prefer this. Well, then do you prefer this or this? And you just keep building off of it.
And then you can say, guess what? That's high density. Or
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
missing middle.
exactly, yeah.
And
yeah.
then people
Yeah.
start to get it, and it's not so scary
Yeah.
anymore. So I think that's a really great thing to have in there. That was my only comment. Anything else?
Well, going on that too is, they actually talked about doing that with the last survey, but we didn't. But do you know if that's something they're gonna do before they are done with the project?
No, not as part of the master plan.
Oh,
No.
okay. Because it was mentioned that it might be done with our last survey,
Yep,
but it just didn't.
no.
Okay. So it's something that we would do?
Yeah, as you, I mean, this, I don't want to assume, but I will assume that the downtown is, one of the main, next steps that's gonna come out of that will come out of the master plan. But, so as part of that, I mean, you can do a visual preference survey for anything, but I definitely see that that's gonna be part of this whole, downtown initiative. I mean, there's going to be so many components to it, but that definitely should be one of them.
So I think Amy was saying, if the board likes that and that's considered a short term, would the funds for that have to come out of the planning board budget?
No, there's,
No?
no, these
I
would
know
have to be,
we've never had a budget, but,
right, these would have to be, capital projects that we put forth,
okay,
as, as part of the capital, investment plan.
So
okay.
it could take years.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, no. Feels like something we could make up the survey and send it out, because even just to get the master plan done, wasn't that like 5 years?
Mm-hmm.
So if we have to wait another 5 years to do the short-term survey.
Well, I mean, hopefully it's not gonna be another 5 years. I mean, when you look at the implementation plan, a lot of the downtown is, short to midterm.
Right.
And, so, no one's qualified here in town hall to do a visual preference survey.
I just think the Board of Selectmen has a 6-year plan already. So if it's not included in that plan, then are we 6 years out? Or can things be added into the plan?
Well, it's every year, oh, I'm sorry, Jason.
Jason Perot, member of the Selectmen and former member of the Financial Planning Committee. We do have a 6-year plan. That's typically placeholders of, known projects of, somewhat smaller scale probably. Fleet replacements for police, fire, DPW, certain capital projects for building repairs, improvements, maintenance, things like that. There's certainly some flexibility. Some projects that are proposed early on end up phasing out because we, managed to find a grant or something like that, which ends up paying for it and getting it done before it's planned, execution. So, as with everything, we want to plan completely in full context of our funding resources and all of our other projects. So, whatever we would choose to do here for the master plan, that would kind of go through the planning process, and there would be some amount of priorities and some amount of juggling the timeframes according to what the nature of it is, how expensive it is, how quick our household is to do it. And there'll certainly be some flexibility. You shouldn't necessarily assume that because there's a 6-year plan, you're starting at least 6 years out for certain components of this.
It's good to know.
Thank you.
Thank you for clarifying that. Okay, any other comments?
No.
Kathy, do you have any comments to add on this?
No, I guess just to reiterate that, Thursday, the master plan steering committee, will be talking about and I believe that's, right now, that's scheduled to be the last meeting of the, steering committee. So that's for the implementation plan and the executive summary for the, master plan. And then, the 24th will be the presentation of the master plan and, with the public hearing, of the planning board.
I just have a question. Wouldn't the master plan steering committee want to read the whole draft before? Like, I know we're getting the implementation plan, but we've never gotten a copy of the whole draft of the whole master plan put together to review. And, I know as a master plan member, I'd like to review the whole thing before saying, okay, we approve the goals and the recommendations, but we haven't read the rest of the plan. I'd have a hard time approving a plan that I didn't read. And we could read it as a planning board and approve it that way, but I would think the master plan steering committee would also want to read it, just a thought.
I mean, you can certainly discuss that, Thursday night, but, just before tonight, because, you had asked for it, Amy, I sent it out to everybody, on the steering committee, but it's, that part of the plan was, developed obviously before the goals and recommendations, and it's all the base information, that all the various departments in town hall have reviewed, but you've seen it, you just kind of did, you saw it in pieces, bits and pieces, but it's, the whole thing went out to, minus the implementation plan, because you already had that chapter.
Oh, so it just went out tonight?
Yes,
You emailed it out?
yeah.
Okay. Cool. I think we should email it to the whole board to read too, because we'll have the public hearing, and then I think we vote on it after the public hearing. So I think the whole planning board should read it, along with the steering committee.
Yeah, it's still being, you know, revamped, and there's still some departments that haven't, like, finished all of their input into it. So, you know, there'll probably be another version of it, just with more, you know, like demographics or more updated statistics. Like, we have a sidewalk map right now that's in there, but it's not the most up-to-date, and that's being updated as we speak. So what you see in there is not what's gonna end up in there. So, I mean, I can certainly send it out, but I sent it out to the steering committee.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Okay, so on September 19th, there's a master plan steering committee meeting. That's at 7 PM at the library. And then on the 23rd, master plan steering committee update to the Board of Selectmen. That,
Yeah.
no, is that not true?
No, I forgot that. But
Oh.
that, they've done, I think that's the steering committee's third update, maybe. So they just go from time to time.
Okay, and that's 7 PM here in this room.
Yep, as
Not
part
at
of the
the
selectmen's meeting. Yeah,
Okay.
it's not a separate meeting, it's part of the selectmen's meeting.
And then October 24th is the master plan steering committee presentation to the public, all boards and commissions, and the planning board public hearing, and that is at the library.
Yes.
7 PM as well?
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
great. And thank you to you both for serving on that committee.
You're
I know it's a
welcome.
lot of work, and it's nice to have you representing the planning board. Thank you. Okay, so I will, in light of just speaking about the master plan and a couple other things, would anybody like to make any public comments this evening? No? Okay. Did you have something, sir? Oh, no, sorry, I thought you had something. Okay. Okay, then we will move on to any A&Rs,
No,
lot releases,
no lot releases.
bonds.
Well, not specifically bonds, but I'll give you an update, well, kind of jumps, but I'll give you an update on because there are two present bonds that are out there. One that you voted on to reduce but hold, you know, at the last meeting for Newton Street. And so I just have a couple sentences from the town engineer on both of those projects. So on Newton Street, the paving has been done, and that was the big, you know, that was the big crux to get that done. So Fred says the paving on Newton Street will require the edges of the roadway to be mowed back to the limits of the right-of-way and have the edge of pavement backed up with some processed material. This is such an engineer thing. Processed material in order to prevent the new wearing surface from being undermined. Basically, he still has a couple things left to do, and then we'll release the portion of the bond that you voted on at your last meeting. And, but everyone's very happy that as far as in-house here, that the paving has been done. And then, another subdivision that's, been a little on the slow side to get developed, but, some of the board members here were on the board when it was approved. It's called Clark Woods, and it's off of Washburn Street. It's 5 lots, but it's 2, if people remember, it's 2 lots, 2 house lots with houses that, already exist. So it's really 3 houses being built. And so far, there's just 1 house that has been built. It's not occupied yet because the road has not been, completed. But the developer did ask, the developer who's also the owner of the house that's been built, he was asking in-house what the process was so that he could get a bond reduced, but he's not anywhere near getting a bond reduction yet. And so the sub-base has to go down, the first pavement. And also, so the sub-base and the base pavement. So neither one of those have been installed. So we've just let the developer know that there isn't any bond reduction until at least that's done. So whether that comes to you this fall or, because there's a certain date, it all depends on the frost, but there's a certain date that DPWs go by as far as when the last time paving can occur. So if we have a really warm fall and warm winter, the season goes longer. But so I don't know if he'll be before us, this fall or in the spring.
So, if I can ask, Clark Woods, is that coming off of Washburn Street? What's the number on that?
Yes, yep. Well, it was filed originally as 172 Howard Street,
That's what I thought.
and because that's where the two existing house lots, or the two existing houses are,
Yeah,
you know, each on
okay.
their own lot. But it's on, if you come off of, well, depends on which way you get to Washburn, but say you come off of Howard,
Yeah.
it's on the left-hand side, you know, maybe 5 or 6 houses up. And right now, it just looks like a dirt road
Okay, but it's, the access is off?
of Washburn. Yes,
Washburn.
yeah, those two houses, Millie, the
'Cause I know where those two
they'll
houses
still
are.
get there, they'll still get there from Howard Street.
Okay,
But it was, the gentleman owned one of those houses, then bought the other house,
yeah,
and then bought the land that was around those houses.
okay,
So the two houses that, actually, it's 172 and 172A,
right,
Howard Street, those still have an old shared driveway,
Right.
and that'll stay that way.
okay,
But the 3 new houses, only one of which is up right now, they'll come off of this new subdivision road, which you can see cut in, you can drive in, it's,
okay.
I mean, you know, we, as staff, we drive in all the time, it's safe to drive in.
Okay.
You know, you're not gonna puncture your tires or anything, but,
Mhm.
if you were curious.
Mhm.
So, those are those two, Carrie.
Okay, any questions on either? No? Okay. Subcommittee updates, starting with CMRPC. We haven't met yet this month, but as Trish mentioned, we have, I'm sorry, there was a meeting. I'm thinking of the wrong committee. They were just here in Northborough Library and doing a presentation on, it was the FEMA grants and hazardous mitigation, and
And the municipal vulnerability
I'm glad you had to say it, not me.
plan. So MVP, that's what we're gonna call it from
MVP.
now on.
Yes. So that was great for Northborough to host that, and there's the solar meeting that Trish mentioned on the 23rd, and you mentioned you may attend that, Kathy?
Yes, yeah, I have it in my calendar. Yeah, that came up fast.
Yeah.
But,
it did.
but yeah. So I'll go to that, whatever's there, you know, of course, I'll bring back.
Okay, and that just reminded me of training. You sent out a message before, and it may be worth resending, or maybe Andy sent it. It was a OML training in Southborough. Is that this month or next month?
I'll have to check.
Okay.
I don't
If you
I mean, I
happen to-
remember the email, but I don't remember the date.
Okay, so maybe if you find it in your files,
Yes. Yeah,
or I
yeah.
can try to find it.
Yeah, but Carrie, I can do that. I'll just
Okay,
resend
alright,
it to
thank
everyone
you.
tomorrow.
So that was just a training on OML, which is open meeting law for everyone here. And that's it for me. Open space?
So there were essentially a total of 5 pieces of property that Open Space and Concom was considering. 4 of those parcels were owned by the same person and were all attached to some degree. So it started at Lincoln Street, right next to Milliken School. And then, so there was several, there was about 1, 2, 3, I think 4 or 5 parcels there that all connected. And then behind it, and that was a total of maybe 8 acres. And behind that, there was more, it wasn't totally landlocked, there was an access from Auger. And that was a total of 21 acres that we were considering. That, before we could move forward, was put under contract by one of the abutting neighbors. So that's the last, I don't have any other further updates than that, other than it's under contract and moving towards closing, I guess. So that came off the table. The other one was 615 Howard Street. And this is one piece of property with a single-family home on it. And it's kind of further up on Howard. As you drive out, it's got a very long driveway, a house sitting in the first 4 acres of the property. But then when you get right behind the house, there is a rock wall. And behind that is about 19 acres of just complete open space. And it's really kind of neat because once you get back there, you would think you were in a trail sanctioned or a town sanctioned property. There's already trails there, they're already marked. The owner didn't seem to care that somebody's been maintaining them to some degree. It abuts Mount Pisgah, and the trails already are all aligned with the existing trails. So the agreement is that we would get an appraisal for that 19 acres. The owner would do a survey to cut apart his house and lot with his house and 19 acres. Then we would make an offer for $390,000 for that 19 acres, which I believe he has verbally accepted. I see his house is now listed on the market, so he must have did that survey. And I think the next step is for us to move towards a purchase and sale. So that one's going forward, and that's the extent of the open space.
Community preservation?
I haven't done one yet.
Bill?
Yeah.
No, we won't until, like,
Almost November.
the applications are due November.
Okay.
So either, our first meeting will either be December or January.
And you'll let me know when that is, right?
Oh, yes, yes,
Because I
yes.
keep thinking, I've missed one somewhere.
No,
I've
no.
missed it. I know
No.
I have.
You're on the committee.
Okay.
You're officially on the
You're not
on the list,
lying.
Millie. And we'll start to get, we're all human, so it'll be, the week before November 1st that all the applications will come in.
Okay, design review?
No, we haven't met.
Groundwater?
It's all quiet.
Groundwater meets tomorrow night, and they're discussing 125 Rice Ave.
Okay, thank
I
you.
think it's at 6:30 tomorrow night, too. It's not at 7. And it's probably the room next to the planning. This will be my first groundwater, but they're usually downstairs,
It's usually
right?
downstairs, yeah.
Downstairs, one floor, next to the planning office. And it's 6:30, right?
I think it changes, Amy, sometimes.
Okay. It's
some-
on the calendar.
Okay, so,
The town of North Brown, 6:30, okay. Yep, so that'll be my first groundwater.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have any preparation for 2020 annual town meeting. Does anybody have anything at this time?
I think we talked about 2 bylaws going in this year, hopefully, at least one of them.
Oh, the solar and hazard?
Yeah, yeah, so that'd be good.
so you'll have, your next meeting is, your joint meeting with the zoning board of appeals. Carrie, do you want me, or you want to talk a little bit about the agenda? Because I think we're going to cover zoning
Yeah,
that
sure.
night.
Yeah, I
That,
don't have it in front of me, but.
I know, I'm, like, you can read this from the email that, I had just put together a brief agenda, and Carrie and Brad, have just added a couple items, but basically it's, it's an all zoning meeting, that we're gonna have on October 1st. So one of the things that, I'm gonna try to get for you is a summary of, I have the old summary that we did from about 5 years ago of the various variances that have been granted by the ZBA, so that, we can look at as to whether there's any trends or not. And, but I would just suggest, and when I send this out to the ZBA too, that if anyone, is thinking of any, bylaws or, any changes to, the existing bylaw or something, just to get those to me ahead of time so that we can just do a little organization, around that, in time for the meeting.
There's one thing I can mention quick that I was thinking of. And, what I was thinking of is down where Norfolk Crossing is, it's industrial land with the overlay of commercial. I was looking at the zoning maps, and I was wondering how hard that is to change it to commercial, like business was what I thought would fit most. Because I feel that whole area is like Norfolk Crossing, Avalon, now we have dentist office. It's really coming along commercially, but we still have the underlay zoning of industrial. So by right, we could get another trucking company, we could get, hazardous waste. Any of those industrial uses are still underlying. And I just thought, I'm not sure how hard it is to do, but I thought that might be something we can add to this year's town meeting, is just bite the bullet and let's change that to commercial. And because there's nothing really, other than Kimball Sand, which will be allowed to stay because they're already grandfathered in, there's nothing really industrial there, but it could hurt that area if something industrial does come in. So that was something I was hoping maybe we can bring up with the ZBA.
I mean, it makes perfect sense that should be rezoned.
Right.
So that's, I mean.
Is that something we could do for this year, you think? I hate to wait another year because
Yeah,
the
no,
trustees are open.
and the only, I mean, it's just, I mean, there's, the only reason why I'm hesitating is just, is not hesitating about doing it, because I've been wanting to do it
Yeah.
for years. But is the, you know, we would, obviously, would be talking to town council about this, is what are the, ramification is probably the right word, but with all of the development that's there, you know, does, that automatically would become grandfathered, but, is that the best approach, you know, to make it all grandfathered, or do we look at what zoning they came in under, which I can't remember right now if it was just, you know, business, you know, one of the business zones, and I would just have to do some research on that. Whether they chose to come in under, like Business West or, you know, Business East, or did they use the commercial overlay district? So I think just to avoid having you know, thousands and thousands of square feet of commercial development be grandfathered, that we'd want to look at the zoning that they created themselves under, which might be applicable to the whole area. So I just, you know, need to do some research.
So it could possibly be like a new zone?
Yeah, it could be. If they came in under the major commercial overlay, you know, you might want to make that, instead of an overlay, you might want to make that the district, you know, and we, you know, call it something else, you know, not Business West, not Business East, but we come up with something else.
Like Business South Commercial or something?
Yeah, so.
Yeah, I just trying to.
So
put
that was from
there.
you know, that started in 2000, well, actually before 2005, so I'm a little fuzzy, but, so let me just look into how they zoned themselves, or what variances they asked for under what particular portion of the bylaw.
That just reminded me of the non-conforming article from last year. Did we hear anything about that?
No, we don't have it back yet from town council, from the AG's office, but I think it was a 30-day extension. Yeah, so,
Like the 22nd.
so there's still a little, or you think it's September 22nd?
Well, I think September 22nd, I think, is when they sent out that it was 30 days, or I mean, August 22nd. So
Oh,
at
okay.
least in my mind, I'm thinking
Okay.
the deadline would be around September
coming up.
22nd.
But we'll, you know, once we hear from them.
Be interesting.
Okay, so great. I'm looking forward to that meeting with the ZBA on October 1st, so that's our joint meeting. Okay, town planner update?
I've sort of gone over everything. Let me just see. Oh, just a couple things, well, one thing with the master plan, is the, I just had handed out to everybody I actually found out that we did this in February with the steering committee. We put together the glossary of terms. So that, and I think I sent it to you electronically too, but if I didn't, okay. So you have that, and then it's been, there's been a couple things updated on that, as far as some historic preservation terminology. So I just wanted to point that out, and that will be part of the master plan also. Because we were talking about some of those definitions, or lack of at the last meeting, but it had been done. And then, yeah, no, that's it.
So we have our next planning, did you have something, is that it? Yep. We have our next planning board meetings, we have October 1st, that's the joint meeting with the ZBA. And then October 15th, so those are upcoming meetings. Next on our agenda are ZBA-related items, so the next two meetings there are September 24th and October 22nd. So I have next on the agenda, any upcoming applications for ZBA?
I don't, what I was focusing on today was, because they all came in Friday and today, were planning board applications. So let me see, on the, I don't think, actually, we don't have the deadline hasn't come yet for the October ZBA meeting. So for the September ZBA meeting is the 125 Rice Ave. So that's the only thing that's on the, I mean, there's a couple other, you know, I have old and new business with them, but that's the only public hearing, next Tuesday for the ZBA, is the 125 Rice Ave.
Did you want to say anything about this pile?
Just real, yeah. Bring it home and study it. So what you have are three things, and I am not prepared at all. Like I said, they just came in Friday and today, so I'm not prepared at all to talk about them. But there's three applications that you will hold hearings on October 15th. And one of the applications is a land clearing permit for Hudson Street. That is a property that, it doesn't officially have an address yet, but that Ron Aspro had come in a couple meetings ago and talked about. So he's submitted a land clearing, site plan approval application. And I can't, I think it's for either 3 or 4 lots. And then there is an application for Steris at 425 Whitney Street, so that's the site plan approval application, and also a special permit groundwater, I believe. And then you also have 41 Lyman Street, which is another industrial property. Same thing in the sense that it's an existing building with a company that's in there, and they want to expand. So what you have is a site plan, approval application for them. So all three of those will be on your October 15th meeting.
Design review?
Yeah, they haven't come before design review, is that because?
With design review, and this is something that you can talk about at the joint meeting. The design review is written that if it's an addition, like in the commercial district, they come before you, that come before design review. But with industrial, it's only if it's a new building, like vacant to new, vacant to a building. So
maybe
that's, yeah, so that's why
We
that's,
should change that.
yeah, we can talk about that.
Yeah.
So that's why that neither one of them are before design review.
When we went to design review, we did that at town meeting, right?
Yeah,
Okay,
because it's a
so
zoning
that would have
bylaw.
to be a town meeting,
Yeah.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
all right.
And the other one does not require it either? The 352 Turnpike Road doesn't need design review?
It's because it's an
It was 352 Turnpike.
It's actually the same one, 41 Lyman.
Oh, this
Oh,
is
41
41
Lyman,
Lyman,
okay.
sorry, yeah.
That's probably just their office or something, Carrie.
Oh,
So
okay.
41 Lyman, yeah, same thing. It's an existing warehouse that they're putting an addition on.
Got it. Okay. Let's see, update on appeal process for zoning interpretations, anything there?
No, I don't. Town council and I missed each other a couple times today because he was trying to at least give me something verbal for tonight. And so I don't have anything yet on that. He was trying to get me something for tonight, and so if it comes in, it could come in tonight. I mean, they work all hours. So, whenever it comes in, I'll, forward it. Whenever his opinion comes in, I'll forward it to the board, of course. But I don't have anything for you tonight.
Okay, and then I know, the additional question that I had was, if the use is appealed for Steris, then what happens with the site plan?
Yeah, and he has that.
He has that as
Yeah.
well. And then, I know Bob wasn't able to come tonight. Is that something like, maybe he could provide something in, like, writing in terms of more information on his interpretation or anything like that?
Sure, I can ask him. And what I also asked town council was to review the interpretations.
Oh, great, okay. And and one thing I've asked a couple of times, I didn't hear back from him, what was the final use on, in the application, it said something different than I thought,
For which one?
for Steris.
For Steris,
For 425.
it's the, what Bob has, and I don't know if it's part of their application or, because they requested a separate zoning interpretation from Bob, but I know where it's coming, where he's, classifying it, which is, Obviously, it's in the industrial. It's the first category in, if anyone has their zoning, it's on page 37. But it's listed under light manufacturing. So it's section, if anyone wants to know the section, it's 7-05-020I1. And if his interpretation, like I said, I haven't looked at those applications that have come in, but I know that Steris, I mean, everyone puts a zoning interpretation in their packet, so if it's not in there, it just means they didn't get it in time when they ran their copies, but if it's not in there, it should be forthcoming.
It's on page 7, it's 737.
So on the bottom of page 37, that's where the industrial district definitions are. So I know that Bob's doing the, under industrial uses, number 1, which is light manufacturing.
Okay, so if it was in something, it was in as something different in the original application, that's just pushed, and we go on the basis of this interpretation.
Yeah.
Yeah, originally it was medical sterilization.
Right, it was
But
different.
then at the meeting, he said processing, which
Yeah, we
falls.
don't have it, I mean, there's three or four categories, 6 categories. But medical sterilization isn't one of the major categories.
When Steris first opened, back in the 90s, there was a medical, biomedical, pharmaceutical use, which is where I think the original Steris probably fell under. But that changed, it went away in the 2008, 2009 zoning. So,
Okay, so then town council is looking at just clarification on, first of all, looking at the interpretation themselves,
Yep, so the appeal process,
and then the appeal process.
and then the, looking at both of the interpretations that Bob did for 125 and for 425,
Okay,
based on your based on the discussion from your last meeting.
okay. And then if for some reason it's deemed that the interpretations aren't precise, what happens to the variance?
Well, let's hope he explains that
Okay, so
in
that's all
his
part of the
email or
conversation.
letter, and if
Okay,
not, we'll have
got
to
it.
do follow-up.
So then we'd want to know what happens first to the variance, and then what happens with the site plan if appealed. Well, first, what happens with the site plan if appealed, and then what happens with the site plan if the interpretation's not correct?
did you ask him the other question about questioning the use of the zoning officer? If there's no appeal process for that?
Yes, yep,
Okay.
yeah, that's what you asked me to
Yeah.
at the last meeting.
Okay, great, thank you. Any other comments or questions there? Okay, next is the Rice Ave memo discussion.
So what I have there, Carrie, is I made copies of the, just the draft that I prepared for you based on, your discussion at the last meeting. And then Amy had sent me some comments and questions and edits, and you also have that version. Excuse me.
What I did, and I don't know if the board will agree, is instead of saying the board members have questions to the zoning interpretation, I said board members discussed that they questioned the zoning interpretation as being a home use. And then in the second part of it, I tried to change it a little to list the reasons why it was questioned. The first one being because it wasn't inside the house, which is the way our zoning bylaw reads, is that a in-home occupation is actually in the home. And then,
That town council's answer on that too.
right,
Whether that, means, what does that mean?
Right.
Does it mean physically in the home or on the property?
well, I mean, it says in a single-family home or in an attached dwelling. And when it talks about the definition, it says, if you want to make it larger, what percentage of floor space? I mean, everything talks about inside, every use that mentions the inside. And I went back and read, like, old zoning on why it was written. An in-house occupation is it's inside the house where your neighbors would never know what was going on. It's a use that it's inside a residential neighborhood, you're allowed to do it just because your neighbors would never know. It doesn't add traffic. You don't have employees, you don't have a bathroom, you don't have a parking lot. So that's why I listed all the conditions or the permits that he was asking for that made it a commercial use. I just changed some of yours and then added some more of my concerns. I don't know if anybody else has anything to add or change. I was hoping everybody could get an advance to read.
Can I give some input? I was part of the major rezoning that was done and where we had lengthy discussion on this. And I do think, to a certain extent, you're correct in when we were thinking about what is a home occupation. Someone might think of an attorney or, someone where they would do something within their home, not outside. But I think, and when did we do the major rezoning, like 5 years ago?
2009
2009.
is when it was adopted.
So 10 years ago. Obviously professions have evolved and changed. You can think about somebody who might be, I don't know, maybe they do flower arranging and they grow all their flowers in their yard. So they go from the yard into their house. So it's a combination of both, right? And they maybe do flower decorating and then they, sell them online or whatever. So I do think regardless of whether, whatever we do with this, I do think this is something that you might want to consider for opening up for town meeting this year to maybe broaden the scope, right? Because I think you could also look at some people who use part of their house and part of their yard, for other things, whether maybe it's an art studio outside. I'm just thinking out, I thought a lot about this and how, I think when we thought about this, when we did the major rezoning, it was 10 years ago and we were thinking about, it's more like an accountant and an attorney or an administrative or someone who does that type of work. I don't think we saw the relationship between land and a building as much as being inside a building. So I think moving forward, you might find people who would say, they might go to the ZBA and say, well, I want to do a yoga studio, but I might have classes outside, or I want to do something. So I think moving forward, we might want to broaden the scope a little bit. I don't think this is clearly, and this is like 90% of the work is outside, 10% is in. I get that. So it's not an even 50-50. But I do think that there might be some applications along the way where someone might use the land that they have as well as the inside to blend their business together.
That's a good point.
I don't know, I'd have to look at that carefully, because when I did research in all the other towns, it was very specific that you couldn't have anything outside, like you couldn't have storage, you couldn't have people. Because then it's infringing on your neighbors, and then you become a commercial business, and then you should be in the commercial business area. I think with flowers, it falls under agriculture,
Okay.
but I'm just,
We'd
yeah.
have to probably do research and see what other, but I think there might be a few that might use the land. I think in this case, it's definitely 90% land and only 10%, so it's sort of stretching it. I agree with you 100% on that. But I just think that when we wrote this, it was 10 years ago, and we were thinking more of an accountant or an attorney or somebody who's meeting a client at their house and staying within an office area versus, having more of a commercial area for their office building. I do like the way Amy highlighted some of this stuff and sort of wordsmithed it a little bit. I do think you can take some of this other stuff out. I don't have a problem taking it out.
Which parts out, the specifically?
Yeah, just say, because
Oh, yeah, okay.
take this out and add this in.
Okay, so maybe, just to make sure everyone can provide feedback here. So we have the question of whether it's inside or outside, so we're interested to get down to the bottom of that. And then we want to consider the following concerns that were discussed at our meeting. Anthony, did you have a chance to review the tapes from September 5th?
I had such a difficult time hearing things, I just kind of gave up after a while.
All right. So if you heard and if you were able to hear and have concerns, please participate. Okay, so that first component is just really about the inside or outside. Then we cross out the next few things, and then we talk about intensity, requiring multiple special permits.
So you're going off Amy's?
Oh,
right?
yeah.
I just want to make.
Yeah, I'm
okay.
just looking, I'm just making sure, I just want to make sure that the board feels comfortable with these comments and/or has additional or different comments. So, in some cases, it doesn't meet the conditions of a home occupation, regardless of special permits. So that includes having more than one resident be employed. So they're looking for up to 8. And that you can get a special permit for. And is there any limit historically, like if you were to say, you know, you could have 1 employee, but you want to have 50? Like, is it, at what point is it kind of beyond reason to ask for a special permit? Is there no limit, or?
Not that I've experienced, but I haven't experienced anyone asking for, you know, a lot of employees. You know, the bylaw, you know, I quoted just what was right in the bylaw about 1 employee who's, you know, the resident of the home is usually the you know, the person's asking to do the in-home occupation. So there's that employee who has to be a resident, I mean, who has to reside in the house, and then you can have 1 other employee. And then beyond that, there's a waiver in the bylaw.
The bylaws I looked in the other towns didn't have the waiver. They just said no more than 1 employee. And, you know, no more than 25% of the floor space. They copied the same things we did, but, I mean, I think it's pretty standard throughout the state. But they didn't, the towns, at least the ones I looked at, didn't say, but you can do this because of the special permit or waiver.
So then, in addition to the employees, there were also the professional dog walkers that are invited to pay a fee in exchange for using the property. So then, I assume they don't really count as employees. Are they customers? Do they count as customers? I don't know. If you pay to use the site, are you a customer?
I mean, to me, it wouldn't be an employee. I mean, that's why I wrote that down as, I thought, you know, as one of your concerns. Where did I put that?
You had at the bottom of the conditions, well, if they approved it.
I have, yeah, and I had it as number 4. The applicant mentioned his interest in opening his facility to other dog walking businesses. And
So-
then you were concerned about what those additional, you know, the consequences of those additional users.
Well, in addition to noise, if they become customers, is there a whole different set of regulations that you have to follow if you have a business with customers?
Well, I mean,
On-site customers? I don't know.
the home occupation assumes that you do have customers. I mean, there's no limit when home occupations have been granted in the past.
That's a good point.
You know, you can only have, you know, 5 customers a day, or, you know, they can only come in the morning, or so, you know, I mean, there hasn't been a restriction in the past. And there isn't in the bylaw as far as what a customer means.
My friend tried to open a home baking service. She was baking cookies gluten-free, and a home occupation, she was trying to do it. And they said, okay, you can do it as long as you bring your cookies out, but we don't want people coming in and out. It didn't come to us. It was only in front of the Board of Health, but he put so many restrictions on her that she didn't end up doing it. But she did say, you know, you can't have customers that come and go.
Food is tough. Food is really tough. And like, you know, I mean, I don't know, you know, what that application was, but I just know that, you know, getting past the Board of Health is, you know, I guess as it should be, right?
Yeah.
The people are eating your products that.
Yeah.
But he even outlined, you can't have people coming to your house to buy the cookies. You have to bring them somewhere else, which is like similar to this, they're coming here.
Well, I hijacked your point. Your point was really about the total number of dog walkers and dogs on the property is really unknown and unlimited in that case. The customer thing was just something I asked, not your point, so I didn't mean to hijack that. Does anybody have any comments so far on this point here, just in terms of
Well, we're trying to go through the letter, so I think after we edit it, we'd be happy to read it to you. And this is actually a 3-page letter that gets to,
And I just wanna lay it out so it makes sense too. Sometimes like A and then my next one isn't indented, I don't know.
when we get down to if for some reason, although we recommend denial for this reason, if the use is allowed, and then we list our concerns. My only concern is, on here where it says existing vegetative buffer should remain. I think that should go with, as long as the use is there, that there should be, like, what if for some reason he cuts it down and says, oh, it's gone, right? It should be allowed that, there should always be a vegetative, not existing, but it should always be there. If it's cut down or, it becomes disease and he has to take it down, then he has to put up new trees, right? That's,
Whatever you want,
Should
Yeah,
remain
whatever
or
you
be
want me to type.
replaced.
yeah.
So what is it? Are you adding something?
I just
So,
want to make sure that, we hope that they're not going to approve it, but should they approve it, we're trying to make conditions here that makes it, protects the neighbors. And one, we talked about existing vegetative buffers. So we're saying if for some reason that's existing, but we're gonna say if for some reason it comes down, it needs to be replaced.
So you wanna add that to 3?
Yep,
And what is it that you wanna add?
if for some reason anything happens to that vegetative buffer that's created or required.
Wait a minute, if for some reason anything happens to buffer,
The vegetative buffer, meaning trees, shrubbery, or whatever that's out there to protect between the abutters in this project, that it should be replaced. It should remain, but if it isn't, if for some reason it needs to come down, or he takes it down, someone notices it,
It's compromised or something.
yeah, they go back and say, now plant more trees.
okay, so you wanna add to 3, if for some reason anything happens to vegetative buffer, then it should be replaced by the applicant. Right? Is that-
Yeah.
okay.
I'm wondering with mine, you see how number 2, I went A, home occupation, and then there's a paragraph about the dogs? I wonder if that should be further down under G, cause then there's B, but that paragraph actually doesn't go with my A. See a home occupation, it talks about 8 employees, and then I went in to talk about dogs, but I guess that has to do with the employees. But should that have a B next to it? So it keeps in line, or does that go with the A? I guess I'm trying to figure out where it would make sense in the ZBA, if you're looking at it from the outside.
Well, I read it as you were saying that they're looking to expand up to 8, but,
Oh,
and then
that's
you
true.
added supporting evidence of why, even if you were to give a special permit for 8, we still don't even know the end limit of this.
Yeah, I think that's probably why I put it in there. I had so many thoughts and cross-outs. It got confusing where I wanted to take everything out.
Okay, then we jump into traffic. So you're citing the section of home occupation conditions.
Yep.
No traffic shall be generated by the home occupation in greater volume that would normally be expected in a residential neighborhood, and any need for parking generated by conduct of the home occupation shall be met off the street and other than a required front yard. And then this proposal includes a parking lot with 12 spaces along with 5 commercial vans. Rice Ave was described by several abutters as a quiet road that abuts conservation land and a country road. Traffic generated with van trips back and forth to the site, plus an undetermined number of professional dog walkers who pay to use the site would be more than, that's just would be more than normally generated by this single-family residence. Any comments or questions about that?
Nope.
Okay. Then citing another condition, no equipment or process shall be used in the home occupation which creates noise, vibration, odor. This use creates both excessive noise and potential odor as waste is accumulated throughout the day and week and awaiting disposal. Anything on that? Okay, then we have a couple one-offs. D, an employee bathroom is not residential in nature. E, the amount of dog waste is above what would be at a single-family residence. F, the application states that the applicant is aware that he'll need a commercial kennel license from the town of Northborough, which in of itself implies the property is a kennel. So, is that true? They need a commercial kennel license from Northborough?
It says it in the application.
No, he's not operating as a kennel.
Okay, so
The
he does
kennel-
not need a license.
No, that's not what he's proposing. That, I mean, he didn't describe that to you?
He said in the paperwork. I have it, and I don't know if he's changed from it, but
I wonder if he thought that because he wanted to bring 3 more dogs to stay overnight. Remember he said that sometimes they like to have
Yeah.
sleepovers? I don't know.
we're right here, relevant.
I don't know what it
I'm
was.
not a kennel holder, I'm not a kennel holder, blah, blah, blah. But in the end, because we are caretakers of dogs, we understand we will need a commercial kennel license from the town of Northborough before we can start operating on the premises, even though we are not a kennel.
Does he just not understand?
Probably, because he didn't apply for
Okay.
one.
Okay, so
And
take
a
that-
kennel means you have 3 or more dogs that you're boarding. That's what our definition of kennel is.
So they
Right,
have to be
and-
staying overnight, not just during the day.
Right, he can have, just like the dog walker that was approved for, Brewer, he can have dogs stay overnight, but only, 2 at a time. Up to 2. Because 3 pushes you over into what, the kennel definition in our bylaw.
If they stay overnight.
Yeah.
What about a doggy daycare? They don't have to have a kennel license?
No,
They do according to the state definition though, so that was
That's-
gonna be another zoning change I was thinking, is that our dog and kennel bylaw, all our definitions should be updated to match what the state says. Because the state talks about a kennel as daycare too, because
Mhm.
a kennel just doesn't board overnight, they board during the day. And this, I have the state definitions, and when I looked at other towns, Lake Natick and others, they follow the state definitions. And there was a daycare exactly like this dog daycare over in Natick, and they called it a kennel. And they had it in a neighborhood, and then they banned kennels from neighborhoods at their last town meeting. But I do think that if our definition doesn't include kennel as daycare, that we should update it to match what the state says.
Okay, so for this letter, should we take out F? If he doesn't
Yes, if he
actually.
doesn't have to go for a kennel license. Which in another town he would, so it's another reason why not to allow it. And I was gonna add a J, I was just thinking about it when I sat down tonight, is, his hours of operation are 8:30 to 4:30, Monday through Friday. That's, like Michelle said, that's like 80% business, 10% sleeping there. I mean, his occupation is taking up more of the day than his actual,
Actually, he said sunrise to sunset, so he's not thinking about sunrise could be during the summertime, 6 AM. So he was gonna change the hours.
So
'cause
that's
he
more of a
wrote
condition.
sunrise to sunset. Yeah.
but I think sunrise to sunset, Monday through Friday, also would make this use a commercial use more than just a residential use. He's using it more as a business than as his house. But I don't know if anybody wants to add that.
Well, would that be a condition, you think? If it were allowed, then the condition would be maybe, were you suggesting when you said that, Michelle, that maybe that be a condition? I can't remember.
No, his application says sunrise to sunset, and I
Yeah.
said, have you thought about, summer hours, that means 6 AM to almost 7 PM. In the wintertime, that might mean, 8 AM or 7 AM,
Right.
so, what is really your hours? And he says, that's a good point, we should just put designated hours.
Okay.
I think the fact that he wants to to, like, I wrote down, he had said 8:30 to 4:30, Monday through Friday. That makes him commercial business, but I don't know if anyone wants to add that. I just think it adds to the intensity.
So I would just expect if I had an in-home business that I would be allowed to if it were truly in my house, I would expect that I could operate from like a typical business day regardless. That's just my feeling though. I don't know if anybody has any other thoughts on.
I'm sorry.
If you were to say your hours of operation are 8:30 to 4:30, that it just further implies an increased intensity and perhaps that we're implying commercial. But I'm just thinking like any in-home business, you would assume that you would work business hours.
Okay.
I would almost, that's why I point to it as a possible condition, like rather than sunrise to sunset, is it a Monday through Friday, normal business hour operation? So that it's not till 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock at night. But whatever you guys think, if you wanna put it in there, that's majority rules, so you tell me.
No, I think he should be a 9 to 5. I just don't think it should be sunrise to sunset. I've never seen that.
So add that as a condition if they decide to pass.
Change your hours from sunrise to sunset,
Or what, 9 to 5?
or 9 to 5, yeah.
I don't know.
Okay.
Okay, and finally, in meeting the requirements of a special permit, we'd ask the ZBA to carefully consider safety concerns. Abutters in attendance describe the road as narrow, without sidewalks, and with a curve and hill that creates visibility issues. So that speaks to the special permit.
Amy, can I just ask you on the first page?
Yep.
Or any, actually, where you have yellow, is that what you're adding?
Yeah, I just highlighted my changes. So the ones with the strike through, I was taking out, and the ones with the highlights, I added.
Okay.
But then as I got into the next page, I got confused because I made too many changes, so. I just left it as is, and I highlighted, although we would recommend denial, because I know I added that. But up on the top there, I think I added a lot. I think I pretty much just got rid of 2 and 3, and then just added everything below it.
Okay, any additional comments on this? Or additional edits or numbers or whatever?
Can I just ask you a question about the hours? What did you guys end up deciding on that? Is that getting added someplace?
To specify the hours.
As a
I think
Yeah,
it
is
should be
are you-
specified,
Yeah.
if it's under the special permit, he needs to define his hours. So it's below
Okay, so
number
F
5.
comes out in the middle of the document,
Right,
and then there's 6 things listed under special permit,
and add it as number
and
7,
then we'll add
right.
the, hours of operation should be what?
9 to 5.
All right, not the 8:30 to 4:30 that, isn't that what he said?
Yeah, I think you said
Oh,
8:30 to 4:30.
Okay, I'm fine with that too,
Yeah.
yeah.
I had a hard time thinking of conditions, because it was hard to condition something you didn't think should be approved. So I don't know if there's any other conditions, I didn't really think long and hard into those.
And just one quick question, Kathy. On number 4, he did mention that he wants to expand his dog walking business in the future. He at one point maybe talked about products or something. But that's not before the ZBA right now, right? We're really very specific about what's before them, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
if he
it,
has to expand, he has to go back.
he would have to go back, yeah.
That's a very catch.
So I would like that, like, any expansion, he needs to go back before them.
All right, that's a good one. Any expansion or And the other dog person over in Borough, we did set a condition that if, it changed hands, they would have to come in front of the board again. Like, it was only valid with that one person. It was a condition of time,
No condition of ownership.
condition of ownership.
Is that allowed? Can you say that this, if
Yeah.
approved, it could be a condition
You
of
can,
ownership?
yeah, you can, with a special permit, you can, there's tests that you have to prove, as to why it should be limited to one, to that person. You know, technically, that's what the ZBA is supposed to do when they, or anyone that's a special permit granting authority. But you can, if you meet those tests, you can limit it to that specific applicant, as opposed to running with the land.
I thought number 6 about having a special dumpster for the dog waste was good, but I also think maybe some restrictions on that, like it must be picked up weekly, not bi-weekly, would be important.
That's a good idea, too.
So let me just go back
Instead
to.
of saying should a dumpster, it should say a dog waste company should be required.
Let me just go back to the special permit, so you want to add a condition under the special permit section about that the special permit should, run with the applicant, or be limited to the applicant.
Yes.
And the one Michelle said about any expansion has to come back.
Yeah, I've got that one. All right, and what about dog waste?
That a dumpster is, or dog waste company is required for weekly pickup.
Which I can say, I am on the groundwater committee, and he has an application in front of them tomorrow, and he does show that he's gonna have a dog waste company come. He worked out a deal with Harvey to have a big bucket that's gonna be picked up once a week.
Where will that bucket be, though? So,
He said that in the groundwater application, that the, he showed how he's gonna pick up the poop with the poop bags. The poop bags are gonna go into barrels that are lined with bags. And then he's gonna eventually put those bags in the bucket that will get picked up. So he says during the day and during the week, he's gonna have a lined garbage bag with the top. And he's gonna pick up all the waste during the day and throw it in those barrels. And then at the end of the week, he has a contract with Harvey that will pick it up.
when a commercial business has a dumpster and goes, what are the usual requirements if you have some sort of massive trash receptacle? Do you have to put like something
Screening,
around it,
yep.
screening?
That's
So
what
this is
screening-
what concerns me about when we tinker with something that's commercial and residential, is now you get to circumvent all sorts of other, like, review that would normally be required. So things like, you know, we hope that screening would be put in place, but, or even with the parking lot or the vegetation, usually you'd have like, I don't know, the design review get to weigh in. So I struggle with this a lot because it's just really circumventing a lot of things in place that, I don't
Right.
know, I mean, can we put in, I guess we can put in a condition for screening. But now we're talking about having a dumpster on a, I know, I don't mean to be hypocritical because we're saying we want a dumpster, but then what does that look like? What does that look like in the neighborhood to have a commercial dumpster or bin, whatever it is, right? Any thoughts on
And
that?
where is it located?
Where is it
You know,
located?
and
Where,
How do you manage odors?
and rodents,
have
how do you
to-
manage rodents or anything?
That's a really good point.
Is it?
Everything's being circumvented.
Would the ZBA actually go into that much detail and write up their decision based on that, or do they not go into that much detail?
I mean, it's really a case-by-case basis, so,
Yeah.
but,
I mean, it's the nature of the planning board to go into that much detail just by how we work with the applicants and stuff.
yeah, I mean, the ZBA decisions are usually, I mean, they're quite thorough, but I don't want to, I don't know what the ZBA will do, so I don't want to
Right.
say what they may or may not do for conditions, so.
Well, something back to the dog waste, you could always put in something where the Board of Health could be intervened, because if you're getting an odor from it, that would trigger complaints to Town Hall, which is going to go, and if there's an odor, maybe would it trigger the Board of Health to issue a complaint? Would that how the process work?
Yeah, it would go, yep, it would go, any odor complaint would go to the Board of Health first. Yep.
Well, also, you'd have to, consider what the location is of that dumpster.
Right.
Because of either abutters or, just the odor. I know when we have a stable permit, you've gotta be a certain distance from property lines and wetlands and all that stuff, because where you dump manure has to be a certain place. I don't know if there's restrictions that would have to, because of the type of waste it is, that where it has to be.
Well, just as a side note, what is so interesting about Massachusetts is, there's all kinds of horse, and I'm not gonna begin to say that I understand, how the regulations are done for Board of Health, but there's very specific regulations
Yeah,
for
that's what I'm
horses.
saying. Yeah.
But yet, if this property, piece of property, if he decided that he wanted to have cows, he wouldn't be before any board or the Board of Health. Or if he wanted goats. He would be before the Board of Health if it was pigs and horses. If he wanted a llama farm. It's kind of fascinating land use wise if you think about it, because why are most farm uses just allowed outright? There's nothing you can do zoning wise about them. But for some reason, pigs and horses have the most regulations around them.
So what we could do
Or
is.
if you wanted to have goats or chickens, or, it's
Huh.
kind of crazy, I think, but.
We could add to that language is, weekly pickup, but storage must be away from any abutters' property lines,
Do we say how many feet away?
That's where you get into the detail and then,
Yeah.
If you're going to enforce it, then you're, the person who goes out to enforce it, they're gonna say, well, what does away mean? Does that mean 5 feet? Does that mean 10 feet? 20 feet? Does that mean next to your house? It's a hard thing when you're asking town, because
What's standard on commercial? Is there a standard?
not really,
Is there any regulations around dog waste in terms of where dog parks are and how things are disposed, or kennels, or do you aware?
Oh, kennels maybe, but I'm not aware of dog parks.
I just don't, I think it's,
It's not really
I
a
don't think
land
it's
use
wise
issue
for us
I'm
to come up
familiar
with some
with.
solution for how he should dispose his waste without really having a better idea of what all the parameters are. Because to me, it's such a serious issue. Is this,
Kennels
you had
has
mentioned, is
tons
this
of
before the town council right now as the interpretation, or is this, did I hear that correctly?
Yeah, the planning board asked at the last meeting to have the interpretation reviewed by town council.
And what happens if he disagrees with the interpretation? Or we just don't know what any outcome would be until we hear from him?
Right, there's no, playbook that I can point you to that says if this happens, you go this route, but,
Yeah.
so either town council will agree with the interpretation or would disagree and then, state their reasons why they would be disagreeing.
So the reason we're going through this exercise is if town council agrees with the interpretation, and then the ZBA acknowledges that agreement and then approves the application, then we're trying to say, if you're going to go ahead, even though we prefer you not to approve it, then there's this whole list of conditions we're trying to really get them to.
I fully appreciate that. I just want to make sure that it's hard for us in a couple minutes to determine how all of this waste should be handled. And are we thinking about all the issues that are possible? And I just,
Right.
But I understand we don't have a lot, if the town council says, yes, I agree with this, and moves forward, and ZBA does approve it, then we, obviously should have all sorts of
And I'm
conditions.
gonna guess, like I said, it's just a guess of mine because I don't work with the groundwater advisory committee, but I'm going to guess that the dog waste is gonna be, there aren't any chemicals on site, so I'm gonna guess that the dog waste is gonna be, a main topic of conversation tomorrow night at their meeting.
Does a special
How's that
permit,
handled based on, the dog waste can
Does
affect
Fred know?
groundwater?
All those rules?
Well, you have,
Or should
you
I
have
start
a
researching?
bylaw that references kennels in there, right? In our bylaw, we talk about kennels, right?
Yeah, but that's just a land use,
Oh, it's a land-
that's,
Doesn't get into the other detail? Okay.
No, we don't talk about.
Does the
poop in
special
zoning.
permit for groundwater protection come to planning board or no?
Depends on what district they're in.
Oh,
In
I see.
industrial districts, it's before you.
Oh, okay.
Um,
Gotcha. Okay, all right, so the heart of our letter is that we don't agree with the use. And we have our reasons for why we don't agree with the use.
Okay, and everything's on the first page, I just want to make sure everything on the first page is getting changed? The way the yellow is written? I mean, the way the yellow is highlighted?
Do you want me to redo the first page so we can make sure that?
No, I have it.
Okay,
I just
yeah.
want
Yeah.
to, I mean, you went very detailed on page 2 and 3.
Yeah.
So I just want to know, I don't have any comments on page 1.
Do you want me to read this
So
out
you-
loud so the public can hear it too?
Sure, Michelle, thank you.
All right, let me just read this out. Okay, so, first of all, I'm probably gonna destroy this applicant's last name, but I'll just say Chris and Casey, the applicants for 125 Rice Ave, attended the September 5th, 2019 planning board meeting to provide the board with an overview of their proposal for a dog walking facility to be operated by Chris on their property at 125 Rice Ave. The board members discussed the proposal and questioned the zoning interpretation that would allow this use with a special permit as a home occupation / home personal service in the residential C zoning district 7-5-020C. Residential uses accessory home occupation and occupation conducted as an accessory use in an owner-occupied detached single-family dwelling or a detached accessory structure by the resident owner or members of the owner's family. That's the definition.
Yeah, do you want me to fix that sentence?
Yeah,
Because, I mean, it just reads as a definition,
That's what
So-
I did, I put the
Yeah.
definition.
but I mean, so, okay, so I'll fix that.
Fix it, so.
the planning board respectfully requests the ZBA consider the following concerns discussed during our September 5th meeting. 1, the proposed business is not conducted in an owner-occupied detached single-family dwelling or a detached structure as the primary business operations occur outside the home. So that's all one's gonna be. 2, the intensity of the use as proposed requires multiple special permits to meet the condition of a home occupation, and in some cases does not meet the condition of a home occupation as outlined in the bylaws, regardless of special permits. Specific areas of concern across both instances include: A, home occupation limits no more than one non-resident to be employed on the premise. The applicant states he presently has 1 employee and is looking to expand up to 8 employees. Although the estimated capacity for each employee is to walk up to 5 dogs per employee, additional professional dog walkers from the general public are invited to pay a fee in exchange for using the property to walk their dogs. The total number of dog walkers and the dogs on the property at one time is unknown and unlimited. And then B, I'm assuming is another zoning that you're
That's another,
referencing.
yeah.
C664.
Amy, what section are you referring to
That B was a
there?
condition under the home occupation.
C6B4 is part of home occupation?
Yeah. It was one of the conditions, so
I'm just
maybe you
gonna-
wanna,
I'm just gonna
Say
put it as
that.
section number so people know what.
yeah,
Okay,
and you can
talking
list
about.
that it's another condition if it makes more sense that way.
yeah, that would make sense. No, okay, so this condition, the condition of a home occupation, no traffic shall be generated by the home occupation in greater volume than would normally be expected in the residential neighborhood, and any need for parking generated by the conduct of the home occupation shall be met off the street and other than a required front yard. So then she takes it. This proposal includes a parking lot with 12 spaces along with 5 commercial vans. Rice Ave was described by several abutters as a quiet road that abuts conservation land and a country road. The traffic generated with van trips back and forth to the site, plus an indeterminate number of professional dog walkers who pay to use the site, would be more than would normally be generated by a single-family residence. And now, then you're talking about the next condition, Amy,
Yep,
which
that's
is,
another condition.
so then she talks the next condition, which is about, that's 666, which is no equipment or process shall be used in the home occupation which creates noise, vibration, or odor. When you mean dot, 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 did you just not complete the condition?
Yeah.
So you need to complete that condition. Can you do that, Kathy?
Mhm.
Okay. Otherwise, the ZBA won't understand it.
Right.
Well, they'll understand it, but they'll just say you didn't do it. This use creates both excessive noise and potential odor as waste is accumulated throughout the day and week and awaiting disposal.
Does that make sense?
That last part doesn't make sense, but you can wordsmith that, Kathy, right? Meaning awaiting disposal of dog waste.
Or pick up?
Okay. And then the D and E, that's what you're talking about,
The intensity.
the intensity. And the intensity would be, an employee bathroom is not residential in nature, and the amount of dog waste is above and what would be at a single-family residence. And we take out F, and then go to, finally, in meeting the requirements of a special permit, we would ask the ZBA to carefully consider the safety concerns of butters and attendants, describe the road as narrow, without sidewalks, and with a curve hill that creates visibility issues. So that's the argument about why we think they should deny it. And then, if they choose to vote in favor of it, Amy wrote, we would recommend denial for the reasons listed above. If the use is allowed at this property, we ask you to consider the following areas of concern as potential conditions on the special permit. The first one is site distance exiting the driveway onto Rice Ave. 2, limit the number of dogs allowed on the site at any one time. 2, 3, as over 3 is a kennel. So I think you might want to, I think we may need to expand that, or does
Yeah,
the ZBA?
what is it that you want to say there?
So when
Just
she
to-
goes limit at one time to 3 or over 3 is a kennel.
I just want to limit the number of dogs.
So what she's saying, when you're limiting the number of dogs, when it's over 3 is a kennel means when they're staying overnight during the
According
day.
to our definition, not the
Yes.
state's definition. Yeah, I just think that's an issue too. But, I guess.
So
I don't
if
know
you
how many
make this
dogs we
comment
could pick.
about 2, 3, and over 3 is a kennel,
Yeah,
that might be confusing to the ZBA, because the ZBA is gonna determine when more than 3 dogs stay overnight, it's now become a kennel. During the day, there is no
right. So what-
regulation. We're just asking them to limit it.
Yep.
So take out that
Should we mention a number?
second half.
Like, because our limit is different than other people's limit. Like, I don't know, what would you consider a limit?
I think
be
what
in
you
a
should just say is
residential
limit the
neighborhood.
number of dogs allowed on the site at one time, period. Please remember, over 3, any amount of dogs over 3 is, for overnight is determined as a kennel. So that you're letting the ZBA know, which I'm sure they already know because they enforce the zoning, but that's how I would phrase that. Number 3 is existing vegetative buffer should remain between 125 Rice Ave and the nearest abutters at 139 and 143 Rice Ave. And we added language was if the vegetative buffer is removed, that it needs to be replaced. And then number 4 is the applicant mentioned his interest in opening this facility to other dog walkers, other dog walking businesses in the future. And we are concerned with the additional noise, refuse, and traffic that would be generated by additional users. And we also going to ask that any expansion needs to come before the ZBA. Any permits required by the Board of Health to have a large number of dogs on the property at one time? I don't know what that means.
I think Kathy, I didn't add that.
Did you add that, Kathy? Number 5?
Maybe
Any,
there's a question.
are there any permits required by the Board of Health to
No,
have?
that's not me.
What's that?
Maybe I did not. I don't know. I was looking it over the last couple days.
You didn't add that
Maybe I
question,
meant it
right?
as a
Oh,
question.
wait, yes, I did.
Okay.
I just, I said that was an area of concern, that are there any permits required by the Board of Health.
Okay.
So maybe
Have
add
a
a
large number
question.
of dogs on the property at one time. I think Millie asked that at the
Yeah.
last meeting,
Mm-hmm.
was anything needed from the Board of Health?
The number 6 would be, should a dumpster or dog waste company be required for the property as opposed to putting the waste in the curbside collection? And we recommended to add weekly pickup, and it must be stored away from the abutter's property. Number 7, the times of hours are 8:30 to 4:30. And number 8, if it's approved, that the ownership, that they could put a condition that the ownership stay with the owner, not transfer it to another owner. And that was our letter.
Okay, are there any additional comments from the board in the letter?
Just out of curiosity, on the first, where the site distance exiting the driveway, is there any reason why we also, you don't want to put in entering and exiting? Or is it just, does that not make a difference, really? Just conditions, it'd be the same.
Yeah, it's usually when you exit the site, you want the site distances so that you've got the clearance, that when you're pulling out of a site to see 200 feet, that's the requirement in our zoning, is that you should have 200
Okay.
feet clearance on each side.
The only other thing that I have, which, in terms of where the driveway exits onto the road, it seems like it's right on the edge there. Ideally, I'm not sure that's the best place. If there are safety issues with that hill or anything else, is that even the best place to exit? But again, we're not, that's something the ZBA may have to take a closer look at.
I don't think you can move it, right? Is the aqueduct there?
So you don't have a choice. All right. Well, then I guess it just falls under safety concerns
Yeah.
in general, and they've been outlined here. Okay, so, I mean, we're waiting, any other comments on this letter? Or no? Amy, thank you for taking a lot of time on this. This is great. It captured a lot of our feedback from the last meeting.
And Kathy.
Oh,
Not
Kathy.
yours.
And thank you for capturing it. So we send our letter and the ZBA does a site plan. In the meantime, we're figuring out a little bit about the use. Regardless of how this particular application works out, I think what I'm struggling with from these types of things that come through is, you know, if we have our bylaws say one thing, you know, I don't think we mean that you can come up with 15 different special permits to make it bend into to fit a use that really we didn't intend. So I don't know how to fix that or what to do about it, but it seems like a lot of people here have concerns about a commercial use in residential, and I don't think we intended for that to be the case. So I don't know how we get past that. You can't, you know, I could put a hotel on my street with 20 special permits. So how does that?
Well, so this is a question for the board and for Kathy. I took the training at the TC last year, and in my notes, I said so this is training for special permits and variances. Number 1, special permits. If it's not specifically listed, it's prohibited. So, I mean, just to that point, did I interpret that wrong? Is that not right?
No, that's, yeah, if the use is not specifically listed in your use table, then it's prohibited. And then someone would seek a variance if they wanted to pursue that. But this is, you know, determined by the building inspector, as any zoning use that comes before. He makes an interpretation of where it fits into the existing bylaw or if it doesn't. So in this particular case, he says it's a home occupation, and then under home occupation, there's several kinds of home occupation, one of them being home personal service, and so that's what he classified this as. So, and you need a special permit for that. So that's how that fits in.
So it goes back to.
Whether you agree with it or not, that's
Right.
how that fits in.
Understood.
It just seems hard because if we don't define a dog walking facility, I don't see how it can be put in there, because we could say, okay, well, I'm a home occupation, I want to be a kennel, or now I want to grow marijuana. You know, you don't allow it, but I'm going to grow it in my house because it's a home occupation. Like, it seems like anything could fit under home occupation. That's what concerns me with that. And if it
So
does,
it's something that we can talk about for town meeting. I mean, the problem is we have an applicant before us that you know.
Right.
Just trying to figure out how to deal with this one.
Yeah. All right, well, we don't have
And I
to,
think it's, to answer your question, that's a worthy discussion to have before the ZBA, who's gonna be with us next time.
yeah, to figure that out a little bit.
So what I'll do with this is, is just redraft it, obviously, and just send it back out to you tomorrow or Thursday. Let's say by the end of the week, I'll have it out to you, well, hopefully by Thursday. And then, then it'll go to the, zoning board, for their meeting on Tuesday.
Okay.
Will they get it in advance? I know being on a board, like to get it at least a day or two in advance, just so they have time to read it and actually think about it.
Yep, it's always our goal.
Yeah.
And one thing we don't know about, in hearing back from town council is just timing. So how do we make sure that if there is an appeal process in place, that we're within whatever?
Well, I had given town council, when I talked with them on the phone, we had this meeting tonight, ZBA meets next week, and so, that's the schedule that we've got to fit, we need your answers for.
Okay.
And, so that, we should, like I said, they could be in my inbox tonight.
Okay, great.
Did you send them an email or you only talked on the phone?
No, I talk on the phone.
Because I think it's all too, it comes back to, I don't know,
Oh.
how it's
Sure.
stated. I don't know, that concerns me.
Does anybody have any comments? I know that, yes.
Okay,
No, go ahead.
I'm in a butter. I live at 139. I don't mean to be crass, but dog poop stinks. I'm a dog lover. I have a dog. I empty his poop bucket every day. The thought of having a dumpster full of dog waste is appalling. And having a Harvey truck come in, lift it up hydraulically and dump it, those things make a lot of noise. I didn't buy this house 13 years ago in a commercially zoned area. I bought it because it was a quiet, narrow, beautiful street. So that really bothers me. I don't see any way around the dog waste odor issue. It will be an issue for me. The value of my house is gonna go down. Nobody's gonna wanna buy it. Chris says that the aqueduct is going to provide a noise buffer. My house is above the aqueduct. There's no noise buffer from the aqueduct. The traffic, this is a bad intersection. If you're coming out of the driveway and you take a right, you're immediately at a stop sign. There's very little sight view distance allowed. I have a blind driveway as it is. It's hard enough getting in and out of my own driveway. Have any traffic studies been done, or are they required?
Yeah.
Carrie, can I, just to keep you all out of trouble,
Yes.
and that this
I'm not
doesn't
trying to get anybody in
and that
trouble.
this doesn't get approved by default, this isn't on the agenda tonight, it's not a public hearing, and it's before another board. So, and the applicant
Those are
isn't
really good for
here.
next week at the ZBA,
I
those are really
can't
good points.
Be there next week. It's my 30th wedding anniversary.
Oh, so happy anniversary.
Thank
You know what
you.
I'd recommend is if, a lot of you can't, letters to the board is really helpful.
Okay, I will do
Or
that.
send me an email with what you just said.
Can I get your contact
Yeah.
information
And then-
before I
yep,
leave? Okay.
Absolutely. I don't have a card with me, but yeah, I'll write it
I'll
down.
write it down for
But
you.
that, you just have to be very aware of that,
Okay.
that
He
Okay.
says the dogs don't bark. Guess what? They do.
We can't take comments, right, Kathy just said? Or they could approve it by
You
default.
shouldn't.
We can't take any comments about the application? Because he's presenting it next week.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
Why are we here?
Yeah, why are we
told
here?
to be here?
You would want to go to the ZBA hearing on the 24th. So the ZBA, so the planning board looks at does a technical review of the site plan, and then we write a letter. So then our letter will go to the ZBA for the actual hearing, which they will be the body that approves or denies the application. So this is actually good to kind of hear some of our reasoning, and if you wanted to bring that back or think of your own reasoning, you could bring that to the ZBA hearing on the 24th.
Number one, have you ever been on Route 9 in Shrewsbury? There's a Century Ford Mazda. Right behind it, there's a dog daycare. I've lived in my house 30 years. If I had to sit and pick up my car one day, that's all I heard.
Yeah.
And this guy from sunrise to sunset is 8:30, 8:45 where I live. I don't know where it is, where you guys live, but by 8:45 the sun sets. So that man can have dogs till 8:45 at night barking.
Yeah.
And there's no barrier, because I could hear them and I could smell them. And I don't live right
Right.
next door to him.
So these are great
These are real
points. So I would actually outline them in writing for sure and send them to Kathy, your email you just provided.
Yes, yep, they
that.
can send it to me, they can send it to planning at town.northborough.
Does that go to
They-
the ZBA, the planning?
Yeah,
email?
anything that comes to me, I forward to whatever board is, you know, that it's before.
Okay.
Any questions?
Do- Well, we can't answer any questions about the application,
No,
but if you have
what
questions
said-
about
what
the
you said
process.
earlier.
Yes.
That's what I'm
Yeah,
saying.
sure.
You said that, she said that the building inspector determined it as a home business, correct? You said that?
Yeah,
Okay,
under
okay.
home occupation.
You're saying.
I don't
You do
agree.
your homework, I can tell.
Right?
You're saying it's not basically a home business because it's taken, the majority of it is outside, correct? You went to some type of seminar and said, what was it you said, you said that if it doesn't conform,
If it's not listed within the bylaws, the use is not listed, it's prohibited.
you see where I'm going with that?
Well, that's why she's asked legal counsel, who represents the residents of
Right,
town
but
of
you see
Norfolk.
where I'm going with
Yeah.
that circle there, those three things? You were, the bill inspector said one thing, she made a great point that it's basically majority bill is outside, and what he said, it's not conforming. So this.
We're hoping the ZBA will hear that same
Right.
message
I
next week.
just wanna make sure I kind of heard that correctly, and
Yep,
it really doesn't make sense.
that's what our letter said, that's
Right.
going to the ZBA.
True, right? Am I not right? I mean,
No, I'm sorry, I was,
No, he's talking
oh,
about.
no,
Yeah,
that's okay,
okay.
but
Smart
that's
aleck,
what I'm
yeah.
seeing here is the three things are not tied in.
Yeah, thank you. Jason, I see you over there.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jason Perot, Board of Selectmen, also on the Groundwater Advisory Committee where this applicant will be before us tomorrow night to address some of the groundwater issues. They had submitted as part of that information packet, a plan for their waste removal. And I'm not sure where the terminology of dumpster originated here, but there isn't anything in this thing that talks about a dumpster being used for the collection. It's said to be just a single 96-gallon standard waste container, just like you have at your curbsides for private trash pickup.
Oh, okay,
So,
that's good to
Just so
know.
we understand what the scale is. for us to-
Excuse me, sir, but the scale is 100 dogs. There's no way the poop is gonna fit in there. for
So
100
just, okay.
If I could, Madam Chair,
Yes.
and I understand the frustration of residents here tonight. As the town planner indicated, this is not a public hearing. And as much as we sympathize with the residents, it's not appropriate to take public input without having properly warned that you would be doing so and allowing all interested parties to participate.
Right. Okay.
So I think some of the people came here tonight to hear the letter, so you guys heard the letter. I think you were at one of the last meetings and you guys wanted to hear the letter. So at least you heard the letter that the planning board was going to be submitting to the ZBA.
So now the best thing to probably do is, in hearing some of those things, I think it's helpful in crafting or thinking about some of your own, how that applies to what you were thinking. And if that lines up with some of the thoughts you had, then maybe those are things that you could share with the ZBA. And that they would be actually having the public hearing, that the applicant will be there and you'll be able to bring up those concerns and questions, and that would be the spot to do so, for sure. And do send letters if you're not able to make that meeting, if you have an event that night, for sure.
We crossed out the dumpster part, didn't we say a dog waste company?
oh, no, I didn't cross out dumpster, I crossed out,
You have to ask him at the public hearing. As part of our letter,
so you want the dumpster taken out?
yeah, I think
We don't know. We don't know. That's why he has to go with his application before the ZBA. He'll explain further. There were a lot of questions we asked him, and then he was gonna go and make clarity to the questions and clarify the questions about his hours and stuff. That would be something that he would discuss with the ZBA. Yep.
Okay, so you want that to be just a dog waste company?
yeah.
Yes. And then did we add screening? We added screening for that? Or do we need screening then if it's not a dumpster? We just want it away from,
Away from the
we had put
neighbors.
something about screening and away.
Yeah, I didn't have anything about screening, but I added that it's emptied once a week and, stored away from, the abutter's property.
That still makes sense. Okay, all right, then, do I have a motion to adjourn the planning board
Kathy?
meeting?
I just mentioned, it says the groundwater, Madam Chairman.
That's
The
okay.
groundwater meeting starts at 6:30, it says online here. Not the 7 that it usually does, if anybody's going.
Yeah, no, Amy and Jason, I'm sorry.
That's okay. So groundwater is at 6:30 tomorrow, groundwater representative in
Yeah.
Yeah,
Conference room B, which is.
conference room B.
Whichever one.
Is
Yeah,
that on
down-
this floor?
Yeah, down one.
Down one floor, 6:30. And on the agenda is the application for Rice Ave, specific to groundwater matters.
and that's the only one on the, agenda for tomorrow night.
Okay.
So we must have another one before Steris.
Excuse me, would it
Another
be the
one.
same forum right now that none of us could speak from?
Nope, the groundwater, yes,
Yeah,
but the
that's
ZBA would actually be the hearing. So groundwater is a advisory committee, so they ask details for the applicant related to groundwater. And then they take the recommendations from their meeting, and they also provide them to the ZBA in an advisory capacity. And then the ZBA reviews that at the public hearing. So you'll get to hear the recommendations from groundwater at the hearing, and if you had questions about that topic, then that would be the time where you could ask any questions about groundwater as well.
Although it's probably a public meeting, not a hearing, right? So,
Yeah, it's not a hearing.
Oh, the ZBA is not a hearing?
Oh,
no,
no.
I thought you meant
ZBA
the
is.
groundwater.
Oh, yeah.
No, I was just gonna say to Amy, as Carrie just said, the groundwater is an
It's just a
advisory.
meeting, right.
And it's just a meeting.
Yes.
And, it's a huge difference in the law between what a meeting is versus what a hearing is. And a hearing is, there has to be, an open invitation for public comment. People are specifically notified by mail. It's all in accordance with the state statute. So a public meeting is just that. It's a meeting that the public can come to, but unless recognized by the chair. But in this particular instance, you know, you all want to, and I understand why, but you all want to discuss the application. And so the applicant has to be there, and it has to be at a public hearing process.
Correct, yes.
I want to discuss one thing on the letter. We don't comment on the front, parking in the front yard. The bylaw specifically says that they can't have parking in the front yard, but the engineering plan has the parking right in the front yard.
Right.
And that's not talked about at all in the letter. It's, section 4, it's the last couple pieces of that.
I think his parking is by his barn.
It's,
It's in front of his house.
yeah, it's right in front of his
Oh,
house. Yeah.
oh, okay. I'll be moving to Northborough after 30 years. Done. I'm so done.
Is there anything that the board wants to add to the letter related to parking, or just acknowledge the parking lot itself?
So Kathy, does the bylaw state that there's no parking on the front lawn of, is it the front lawn or the front of the person's house? What does the bylaw state?
Let's see, for home occupation, about a sign.
It's number 4.
Yep, any need for parking generated, this is one of the conditions, I mean, it's in the zoning bylaw. Any need for parking generated by the conduct of the home occupation shall be met off the street and other than in a required front yard.
So we do include this in the letter. Maybe what we just need to clarify is that this proposal includes a parking lot in the front yard. Do you see how we have on page 2B?
Yeah.
So we point out that condition in entirety, but then after, if we just put, this proposal includes a parking lot with 12 spaces in the front yard, or whichever way.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
That's actually good.
which is not an allowed use in the bylaw. Or an allowed condition in the bylaw.
Okay.
Thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
All in favor?
Right.
Thank you.